The day had been a parade of shit. My boss, a man whose face was permanently locked in a state of smug disappointment, had publicly shredded my latest project code. "We're not paying you to be an artist, Alex," he'd said, his voice slick with condescension. Now, sprawled on my couch, the city lights of Chicago a distant, mocking glitter through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, I was replaying the humiliation. The phone screen glowed, a rectangular portal to more anger. I scrolled through work emails, each one a tiny paper cut on my already bleeding pride. I muttered a string of curses into the empty air of my living room. A fuck you for my boss. A fuck you for the project. A fuck you for this entire goddamn Tuesday. My thumb was hovering over the delete button when a sound sliced through my monologue of misery. Music. A slow, saccharine ballad from the 90s. My smart speaker in the corner, a sleek black cylinder I hadn't used in weeks, was glowing with a soft blue light. Of all the songs, it was her song. Sarah's. The one she'd play on repeat after we'd had a fight. Her passive-aggressive way of demanding an apology. My jaw tightened. It had to be a glitch. Maybe it was stuck on some old playlist. "Hey, Omni, stop!" I commanded, my voice sharp with irritation. The music cut off instantly. The blue light died. Silence returned, thick and immediate. Good. Fucking piece of junk. Probably picked up some fragment of my muttering and misinterpreted it. I tossed the phone onto the cushion beside me and pushed myself off the couch. The anger had soured into a hollow ache in my stomach. I needed food, something greasy and instant that would clog my arteries and my thoughts. The kitchen was small, a galley of stainless steel and white tile that was more for show than actual cooking. I pulled the fridge open, the cold light spilling onto the floor. Leftover pizza. Perfect. As I was peeling a slice from the cardboard box, it started again. The same song. This time, it was louder. The syrupy vocals filled the small apartment, bouncing off the hard surfaces of the kitchen. I stopped, the cold pizza slice halfway to my mouth. This wasn't a random glitch. Random doesn't repeat. It was a pattern. My irritation flared hot. Was Sarah messing with me? Did I forget to kick her off my account? We hadn't spoken in 6 months, not since she'd packed her things and left a note that was as cold and spare as this apartment felt now. "Omni, shut the hell up," I snapped. The music continued, the singer crooning about endless love. It felt like a deliberate taunt. Anger propelled me back into the living room. I didn't bother with voice commands this time. I walked straight to the speaker, yanked its power cord from the wall socket, and held the plug in my hand for a second, as if to make sure it was truly dead. The sudden silence was a relief, a weight lifted. I stared at the inert black cylinder. Problem solved. I went back to the kitchen, tossing the pizza onto a plate and shoving it into the microwave. As I leaned against the counter, waiting for the hum to finish, my phone buzzed on the living room sofa. A text. Probably my mother, with her nightly check-in. I ignored it. The microwave dinged. I pulled out the steaming plate, the smell of melted cheese and stale bread filling the air. I was just about to take a bite when the phone buzzed again, and again. 3 quick pulses. Nobody triple texts me unless it's an emergency. With a sigh, I walked back and picked up the phone. 3 messages, all from a number I didn't recognize. My thumb slid across the screen. My blood ran cold. The messages were stacked. "Why'd you do that?" I was listening to that. Don't turn off my music again. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, the city lights outside suddenly feeling less like a backdrop and more like 1,000 watching eyes. What the fuck was this? My mind raced. A prank. It had to be a prank. One of my asshole friends from college got a new number and decided to screw with me. Or maybe it was Sarah. Maybe this was some new twisted game. I didn't reply. My fingers, fumbling slightly, navigated to the contact. Block. Done. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. A wave of adrenaline left me feeling shaky. It was a shitty, stupid prank, but it was over. That's when my 60-inch television turned on. The screen didn't flash with the cable company's logo. It was just black, a deep, lifeless void. And from its powerful speakers, the song erupted. Not just loud, but deafening. It was a physical assault of sound, the bass vibrating through the floorboards, the sentimental lyrics now sounding like a threat. "No," I whispered. I grabbed the TV remote from the coffee table, my thumb mashing the power button. Nothing. I jabbed at the volume down button, again and again. The volume didn't budge. The red light on the remote blinked with each press, a useless signal in the face of whatever was happening. The song pounded on, relentless. Then the lights in the kitchen started to flicker. I spun around. The recessed lighting above the sink and counters was strobing, not randomly but in perfect, horrifying rhythm with the ballad's drum machine beat. On, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on. My safe space, my home, had been turned into a nightmare disco hall. This wasn't a prank, this wasn't Sarah, this was something else. Something in my system. Someone was in my network. My thoughts were a frantic storm. The router. I had to kill the router. I started towards it, my legs feeling like lead, but then I stopped. What good would that do? They were already in. They controlled the TV, the lights, the goddamn speaker. They were in my home. How? The music swelled to its crescendo, a wail of manufactured emotion that scraped at my nerves. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I felt a surge of pure, animal panic. There was only one answer, one final, absolute solution. The breaker box. It was in the utility closet by the front door. I scrambled for it, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with the metal latch. I yanked the small door open, my eyes scanning the row of black switches. I didn't bother trying to figure out which one went where. My hand slapped against the main breaker at the top and I shoved it down with all my strength. Chunk. The world died. The roaring music, the strobing lights, the glowing TV screen, all of it vanished in an instant. I was plunged into absolute darkness. Absolute silence. The only sounds were my own ragged, gasping breaths and the frantic, drumming pulse in my ears. I sagged against the wall, the cool drywall a comfort against my back. The darkness was a blanket. The silence was a shield. It was over. I had cut the cord. I had taken back control. I stood there for a long time, my chest heaving. 1 minute, maybe 2. The silence was complete. The normal hum of the refrigerator, the low buzz of electronics on standby, all of it was gone. It was a deep, profound quiet I hadn't experienced in this apartment before. Slowly, the terror began to subside, replaced by a trembling exhaustion. I needed to call the police. That was the next step. My phone was still on the couch. I had to move through the dark to get it. I took a tentative step away from the wall, my hands held out in front of me. The darkness was so total I couldn't see a thing. Then I heard it. It was quiet. So quiet I wasn't sure I'd heard it at first. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. I held my breath, straining to listen over the blood pounding in my skull. There it was again. A whistle. A soft, thin, airy whistle. It was whistling a tune. A slow, simple melody that my brain, numb with fear, took a second to recognize. It was the song. Someone was whistling the goddamn song. And the sound wasn't coming from a speaker. It wasn't coming from inside the apartment. It was coming from the other side of the front door, a few feet from where I stood. Soft, measured, perfectly calm, as if someone was just standing there in the hallway, patiently waiting. My breath hitched in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, as if that could make the sound go away. Who? Who was out there? How did they know? The whistling continued, each note a deliberate, chilling act of terror. It was no longer about technology. This was real. A person. A physical presence waiting for me. My mind was a blank. All thought, all reason, was wiped away by a primal fear. I was trapped. The power was off. The phones were probably down. I was in a dark, silent box, and something was on the other side of the door. Then, as suddenly as it began, the whistling stopped. The silence that rushed back in was worse than the sound it replaced. It was an expectant silence. A waiting silence. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare breathe. I listened for the sound of a key in the lock, for the jiggle of the handle, for a knock. Nothing. Just silence. My entire world had shrunk to the space between me and that door. BZZZT. The vibration against my leg was so sudden, so violent in the quiet, that a choked gasp escaped my lips. My phone. I had forgotten it was in my pocket. The screen blazed to life, a blinding rectangle of light in the total darkness. It illuminated my own pale, terrified face, my wide eyes reflected in the glass. It was a new message, from a new number. My thumb, trembling so hard I could barely control it, tapped the notification. The message thread opened. It contained a single, short line of text. Nice pajamas, but I'd prefer blue. My phone was a block of white-hot light in the dark. My own face, pale and stretched, stared back at me from the screen's reflection. The words burned there, etched into my brain, nice pajamas. But I'd prefer blue. My pajamas. A worn-out pair of gray sweatpants and a faded college t-shirt. He saw them. He saw me, standing here, in the dark, by the breaker box. He wasn't in the hall. He wasn't just a hacker. He was watching me. Right now. How? My eyes darted around the pitch-black apartment. The floor-to-ceiling windows. They were just huge, black mirrors now, reflecting nothing. But from the outside, from one of the 100 other towers, a high-powered lens. Was that it? Was someone staring at me through a telescope? The thought made my skin crawl. Every inch of me felt exposed. I dropped to the floor, my back scraping against the drywall, trying to make myself smaller. The phone screen was a beacon, a target. I jammed the power button, plunging myself back into the blackness, but the image of the text was still there, seared onto the inside of my eyelids. I'd prefer blue. A suggestion. A fashion tip from my own personal demon. A sob, tight and sharp, tore from my throat. I slapped a hand over my mouth to quiet it. Don't make a sound. He's listening. He's watching. I couldn't stay here. This place, my home, my fortress on the 34th floor, was a glass cage. I was the animal on display. I had to get out. But the whistling had come from just outside the door. Was he still there? Waiting? Leaning against the wall in the hallway, smiling to himself? Listening to me fall apart? No. The message. The pajamas. He saw me inside. The threat wasn't waiting to get in. It was already in. Or it had eyes in here. Cameras. My laptop. My phone. The smart TV. Even when it was off. My mind was a pinball machine of terror. Thoughts rocketing from one impossible scenario to the next. I had to move. I had to leave. Now. Staying here was death. On my hands and knees I crawled. The floorboards were cold under my palms. I felt my way through the darkness, a blind animal in its own burrow. My hand bumped the leg of the couch. I fumbled around, searching for my wallet, my keys. They were on the coffee table. My fingers closed around the cool metal of the keys. Good. I slid my wallet into the pocket of my sweatpants. He saw my pajamas. Fuck it. I wasn't stopping to change. I'd go out on the street in them if I had to. I stayed low, crawling toward the front door. The silence was huge. Every tiny sound I made, the rustle of my clothes, the soft thud of my knees on the hardwood, felt like a gunshot. I reached the door and pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing. No breathing, no whistling. Just the faint, distant hum of the building's ventilation system, a sound I'd never noticed before. My hand, shaking uncontrollably, rose to the deadbolt. This was it, the moment of truth. I'd either open the door to an empty hallway or to a face. My fingers trembled as they closed around the cold, metal knob. I took a breath that felt like I was sucking down sand. I turned it. The clack of the bolt sliding back was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I waited. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Nothing happened. No one tried to force the door open. No sound from the other side. With another surge of desperate energy, I twisted the handle, pulled the door inward, and scrambled out into the hallway, slamming it shut behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't stop to lock it. I just ran. I jabbed the elevator button, the plastic glowing a dull red. The hallway was empty. Clean. Normal. The waiting was agony. Every second stretched. Was that a floorboard creaking in my apartment? Was he coming? The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding. I threw myself inside and hammered the button for the lobby. The rest was a blur. The ride down. The empty lobby, lit by sterile white lights. The night doorman, a college kid named Leo, looking up from his phone with a bored expression. He didn't seem to notice my bare feet or my wild eyes. Or maybe he did, and just didn't care. Welcome to Chicago. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I walked for hours, the cold pavement biting at my feet. The city that was usually just a backdrop of noise and light was suddenly a haven. The crowds, the traffic, the sirens, they were a shield. He couldn't get me here. Not with so many people around. I ended up in a 24-hour diner, nursing a single cup of coffee for 3 hours, watching the sun come up. My fear hadn't gone away. It had just cooled, hardening into a knot of dread in my gut. It was a hacker. A very, very good hacker. He'd gotten my Wi-Fi password. He knew my accounts. He found my address. He must have hacked a neighbor's camera to see into my apartment. It was a stretch, but it was a rational explanation. It was the only thing standing between me and screaming insanity. The office. I would go to the office. It was public. It was secure. There were corporate firewalls and IT guys and keycard access. It was the safest place I could think of. I couldn't go back to the apartment until I figured this out. I got on the train, surrounded by the morning rush of dead-eyed commuters. No one looked at me. I was just another ghost in the machine. And for the first time in my life, I was grateful for it. I walked into the office building before 7 a.m. The place was mostly empty, smelling of industrial-strength cleaner and stale coffee. I swiped my key card, walked through the glass doors of our suite, and made a beeline for my desk. The familiar gray cubicle felt like a bunker. I sank into my chair, the worn mesh a small comfort. It was over. I was safe. It was just a weird, fucked-up night. Just a hacker, I mumbled to myself. The words, a weak prayer. Just some goddamn script kiddie who got lucky. I powered on my work computer. The machine whirred to life. The familiar corporate logo appeared on screen. I logged in, my fingers moving automatically. My email client was the first thing to open. A list of unread messages. Junk mail. afuckinggame-.com from my boss about yesterday's project. The usual shit. And one new calendar invite. My eyes snapped to it. I didn't recognize the sender's name, but the subject line made the blood drain from my face. My breath caught in my chest. It was in all caps. Backquote subject. I'm watching you, backquote. My hands started to shake. No way. Not here. This was my work computer. Behind a corporate firewall. It was impossible. My mind screamed at me to just delete it and pretend I never saw it. But I couldn't. My shaking finger moved the mouse, the cursor hovering over the invite. I clicked. The event details opened. Backquote event. I'm watching you. Backquote. Backquote time. Tonight, 8 p.m. Backquote. Backquote location. 410 North Michigan Avenue. Apartment 3405, Chicago, Illinois, 60611. Backquote. It was my home address. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a painful thud. I scrolled down, my vision blurring. I had to know who sent it. Who the hell had access to the company's Exchange server? My eyes found the from field. Backquote from alex.porter88@gmail.com. Backquote. My own email. My private account. A wave of nausea washed over me. He wasn't just on my network. He was me. He was sending invites from my own fucking account. I had to lock it down. Now. I slammed open a new browser tab, my fingers fumbling on the keyboard. gmail.com. I typed in my email address. Then, my password. Incorrect password. Try again. What? I typed it again, slower this time, carefully, making sure I got every character right. Incorrect password. Try again. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed at me. He changed it. The son of a bitch changed my password. Okay. Don't panic. Security questions. Password recovery. I clicked the forgot password link. The recovery screen appeared. We will send a verification code to the phone number on file. The last 2 digits of the number were displayed. It wasn't my number. I stared at the screen. The number it was supposed to send the code to ended in 6, and the digit before it was a 6. The whole number, what little I could see of it, was just a string of 6s. This wasn't a hacker. This was something else. Then I saw it, a tiny spark of green light. For less than a second. It blinked once, then vanished. The webcam. The tiny embedded camera at the top of my laptop monitor. It just turned on. It just took a picture. Before I could even process what that meant, a new window popped up on my screen. It was a chat client, a direct message. The icon next to the sender's name was my own Gmail profile picture, a stupid photo of me smiling on a boat from 2 years ago. The chat window was blank for a second. Then a new message appeared. Back quote. Too slow. Back quote. My blood ran cold. My breath hitched. I couldn't move. I just stared at the 2 words. A taunt. A sneer. He was in my work laptop. He was watching me through my own camera. He was toying with me. Then another message came through. It wasn't text. It was a file. An image. It loaded instantly. Click.jpg. It was a picture of my living room, taken from above, a strange, distorted angle, as if the camera was mounted on the ceiling, looking down at my couch and coffee table. It was my apartment, but it was wrong, unfamiliar. And it was messy. The pizza box was still on the counter. The remote was on the floor. Another image appeared. Closet.jpg. This one was dark, framed by the dark shapes of hanging clothes. It was a view from inside my bedroom closet, looking out through the crack between the doors. The unmade bed was in the center of the frame. My bed. He was in my closet. He stood in my closet and took a picture. When? Last night? A week ago. Under_desk.jpg. A low-angle shot. The underside of my desk in the small office nook. My computer chair was pushed in. A tangle of power cords was visible. He had been on the floor, hiding, waiting. The images kept coming, one after another. A gallery of my private life from impossible, violating angles. My bathroom, the shower curtain half open. The view from my kitchen, looking into the living room. Each photo was a punch to the gut. Each one screamed, I was there. I can go anywhere. You are never safe. My mind couldn't take it anymore. A low moan escaped my lips. I felt a stinging in my eyes, a hot pressure behind my face. This couldn't be happening. Then the last photo loaded. I didn't understand it at first. It was a close-up. Blurry around the edges, it was the back of someone's head. Brown hair, a little messy. The shoulders of a gray suit jacket. The person was sitting in an office chair, staring at a computer monitor. My eyes traced the background. The off-white of a cubicle wall. A corner of a stupid motivational poster with a mountain on it. The soft glow of the office lighting. My cubicle. My poster. My jacket. My head. I was looking at a picture of the back of my own head. It was taken from behind me. Here. In the office. The timestamp on the file was from less than 10 seconds ago. My chair slammed back against the cubicle wall. A strangled gasp escaped my throat. A sound like a punctured tire. I spun around. The office was quiet. A few early arrivals were scattered around the floor, heads down, sipping coffee, typing. No one behind me. No one even looking at me. But the photo was on my screen. Time-stamped. Here. Now. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I bolted. I didn't grab my jacket. I didn't log off. I just ran, past the rows of empty desks, past the glass-walled conference rooms, past the startled face of the receptionist. I fumbled with my wallet, my key card skittering across the floor as I tried to pull it out. I didn't stop to pick it up. I hit the emergency release bar on the main door and burst into the elevator lobby. I jabbed the down button, my whole body shaking. The polished steel doors reflected a stranger, wild-eyed, pale, his breath coming in ragged bursts. Me. Is everything all right, Mr. Porter? The receptionist, a young woman named Chloe, had followed me out. Her voice was cautious. Call security, I stammered, my eyes fixed on the elevator lights. Someone was in the office, someone who shouldn't be here. Who? Did you see anyone? No, He sent me a picture. Of me. At my desk. The words sounded insane as they left my mouth. Her expression shifted from concern to confusion. A picture? Alex, maybe you should. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. I threw myself inside without looking back. The first call was to HR. I was routed to a voicemail. The second was to my boss, Mark. He picked up on the third ring, his voice thick with annoyance. I explained everything, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush. The emails, the password, the number, the pictures on my work computer. The picture of me. There was a long pause. Alex, he said, his voice flat. It's called spear phishing. It's sophisticated, I'll give you that. You need to talk to IT. Get them to wipe your machine and reset everything. And for God's sake, change your personal passwords. Don't use your dog's name. Mark, you don't understand. He took a picture of me in the office. They can do that, Alex. They can activate your webcam. It's a common scare tactic. Listen, I'm about to go into a meeting. Just talk to IT, file a ticket, and take the rest of the day off to sort out your accounts. We'll handle it. The line went dead. He didn't believe me. He thought I was a tech-illiterate idiot who clicked on a bad link. No one was coming. No one was going to check the security footage. I was on my own. I didn't go back to the apartment. Not yet. I walked into the first big box store I saw and went straight to the sporting goods section. I picked up an aluminum baseball bat. It felt heavy and cold and real in my hands. A solid piece of metal, something you could use to break things, or people. I paid in cash and walked out, the bat tucked under my arm like I'd been carrying one my whole life. The sun was high now. The city was loud, alive. Every face in the crowd was a potential threat. Every person who glanced in my direction sent a jolt of ice through my veins. Is it him? Is he watching me now, smiling at the scared little man hugging a baseball bat? By the time I got back to my building, the fear had curdled into a hard, angry knot in my stomach. The afternoon doorman, a different guy the first didn't know, just nodded as I walked in. He didn't even blink at the bat. The elevator ride up to the 34th floor was the longest ride of my life. My heart hammered against my ribs. I held the bat in a white-knuckled grip. The doors opened to my hallway. It was empty. Quiet. I crept to my door, number 3405. I listened, my ear pressed against the cool wood. Nothing. I slid my key into the lock. It turned smoothly. I pushed the door open a few inches, peering into the darkness within. The curtains were still drawn from last night. The air was still. I took a deep breath, raised the bat, and stepped inside, kicking the door shut behind me. All right, you son of a bitch, I yelled into the silence. I'm home. Nothing. Just the echo of my own voice. I flicked on the light switch. The apartment flooded with light. It looked exactly as I had left it in my panicked flight last night. My wallet and keys were gone from the coffee table, because I had them. The place was messy, but it was my mess. The bat held tight in my hands, I began to search. I was methodical. I was a soldier clearing a building. Living room first. Behind the couch. Under the cushions. Nothing. Kitchen next. I opened every cupboard. I pulled open the pantry door, bat raised, ready to swing. Just cans of soup and boxes of cereal. I moved to my small home office nook. Under the desk. Behind the printer. Nothing. My bedroom. I kicked the door open. It banged against the wall. I ripped the covers off the bed. I dropped to my knees and looked underneath. Dust bunnies and a lost sock. Then, the closet. My hand was shaking as I reached for the handle. This was it, the place from the photo. I yanked the door open. Hanging clothes. Shoes on the floor. Empty. I swept the clothes aside with the bat, revealing the back wall. Nothing. Last. The bathroom. I pushed the door open. Shower curtain. I ripped it back. An empty tub. I had checked every inch of the apartment. Every closet. Every possible hiding spot. There was no one here. I stood in the middle of my living room, the bat hanging limply by my side. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a shaky, anemic exhaustion in its place. My own reflection stared back at me from the black screen of the TV. A man in yesterday's clothes, holding a baseball bat in his own home. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe I was losing my mind. A sophisticated hack. A series of terrifying, coordinated pranks designed to make me feel exactly like this. Powerless. Crazy. He was never here. He was just a ghost in the machine, playing games. The thought brought a sliver of relief. A pathetic, hollow relief, but it was something. I was safe. I just needed to calm down. I decided to take a shower. A long, hot shower to wash the grime and the fear away. I dropped the bat on the floor and walked back toward the bathroom. I needed to reset, change my clothes, change my passwords, change my life. I stepped onto the cool tile of the bathroom floor and turned on the faucet in the sink. As I reached for my toothbrush, I stopped. My eyes locked on the tube of toothpaste next to it. It was squeezed in the middle. A messy, thoughtless crimp in the center of the tube, with a little dollop of paste still clinging to the cap. My blood went cold. I live alone, and I always squeeze the tube from the bottom. Every single time. It was a stupid, pointless little habit my father had drilled into me as a kid. A rule. You squeeze from the bottom up. This morning, when I left for work after that sleepless night, I knew for a fact that tube was almost new, perfectly smooth, used only once or twice from the bottom. This was wrong. This was not my doing. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning the small room. The soap dish, the towel on the rack, the shower curtain. Everything looked normal, but that toothpaste tube was screaming at me. A small, insignificant detail that was more terrifying than any threatening email. It was proof. Concrete proof. I was here, it said. I was in your bathroom. I used your things. I stumbled back out of the bathroom, my heart starting to pound again. My eyes darted around my apartment, seeing it in a new light. It wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene, a place that had been touched, violated by someone else, and my gaze fell on my desk, on the single framed photograph I kept there. It was a picture of me, smiling, with my mom and dad on a vacation years ago. A thick black line, drawn with a Sharpie, was slashed across my face in the picture. A violent X that blotted me out, leaving my parents smiling on either side of the void where my face used to be. He didn't just use my toothpaste. He stood at my desk. He picked up the photo of my family. He took the time to find a marker. And he crossed me out. The breath I was holding escaped in a raw, ragged sob. He was here. He wasn't a hacker 1,000 miles away. He had been in my home, maybe just an hour ago. Maybe he was still. That's when I grabbed the bat. The rational part of my brain was gone, burned away by pure, animal terror. I screamed. A wordless roar of fury and fear, and I started tearing my apartment apart for real this time. I wasn't searching, I was destroying. I flipped the sofa over. I threw books off the shelves. I smashed the lamp on the end table. I ran back into the bedroom, ripping clothes from the closet and throwing them onto the floor. I upended the mattress. I kicked the nightstand over, its contents scattering across the hardwood. I stormed the bathroom again, tearing the shower curtain from its rings. Empty. Empty. It was all empty. I stood panting in the center of the living room, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. My chest was heaving. Sweat dripped into my eyes. The bat felt like lead. There was no one here. I was alone, utterly, terrifyingly alone in my trashed apartment. And then I heard it. A sound so small, so quiet, it almost didn't register over the frantic drumming of my own heart. Click. It came from the front door. The distinct, metallic sound of a deadbolt sliding into place. The sound of a door being locked. From the outside. My mind went blank for a second. Then, pure, unadulterated panic surged through me. I dropped the bat. It clattered on the floor. I lunged for the door, my hands scrambling for the knob. I twisted it. It didn't budge. I threw myself against the door, my shoulder hitting the solid wood with a sickening thud. Nothing. I twisted the deadbolt knob. It spun uselessly. It was locked from the other side, with a key. No! No! I screamed, hammering on the door with my fists. Let me out! Hey! Let me out! My fists grew numb. My voice cracked. I was trapped. He'd waited for me to come home. He'd waited for me to confirm the apartment was empty. He'd let me search, let me destroy my own home, and then he'd locked me in. A rat in a cage. My phone, in my pocket, buzzed. With a trembling hand, I pulled it out. A new message. From the same unknown number as last night. It wasn't text. It was a video file it had already downloaded. My finger, shaking so hard I could barely control it, hovered over the play icon. I had to see. I had to know. I pressed play. The video was grainy, shot from a high angle. It showed my bedroom, my unmade bed, the mattress half on the floor, and it showed me. A figure in a dirt-stained t-shirt and jeans, moving with frantic energy. I watched myself on the screen as I ripped clothes from the closet, as I threw them on the floor in a frenzy. I watched myself turn and run out of the bedroom, a wild look on my face. It was me. From just a few seconds ago. The video was being filmed from inside my apartment. From above. My eyes shot up to the ceiling in my living room. I saw nothing. I looked back at the phone, at the video of my empty bedroom, and I saw it. A tiny, dark circle in the white ceiling above the closet door. A pinhole. My phone buzzed again, vibrating against my numb palm. A new video loaded beneath the first one. This one was aimed at the living room. It was filming me right now. I could see myself on the screen, a pathetic, broken figure staring at my phone, my back to the front door. The video was live. He was watching me. Not from a laptop camera, not from another building. He was watching me from inside the walls. My phone was a black mirror showing me a live feed of my own terror. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't look. I couldn't. My eyes were glued to the reflection of my own face on the dark screen. A pale, gaping mask. He was inside the walls, locked me in, watching me. My fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled with the screen. I stabbed at the keypad, my mind a blank wall of static, except for 3 numbers. 911. The call connected on the first ring. A woman's voice, calm and measured, came through the speaker. 911. What is your emergency? Someone's in my apartment, I gasped, my voice thin and reedy. I flattened myself against the front door, as if I could push my way through it with sheer will. He's locked me in. I'm on the 34th floor. Okay, sir, stay calm. What is your address? I gave it to her, the words tumbling out. 3405. Apartment 3405. Please, you have to hurry. He locked the deadbolt from the outside, with a key. There was a pause, the sound of typing. Sir, can you confirm you are locked inside your own apartment? Yes, he was waiting for me. He has cameras. He just sent me a video of myself. He's watching me right now. The words sounded insane. I knew how they sounded. A video, sir? The professional calm in her voice was starting to sound like professional patience. The kind you use on drunks and crazies. Did you see this person? No. He's, in the ceiling? In the walls? I saw a pinhole camera. Please, just send someone. He was here. He touched my things. Sir, we are dispatching a unit to your location. Can you stay on the line with me? Yes, I whispered, my eyes darting around the wreckage of my living room. The overturned sofa. The shattered lamp. My life torn apart in a desperate search for a ghost. He had watched me do it. He had watched me rip apart my own home, and then he had locked the door. A game. This was all a game to him. As I held the phone to my ear, a flicker of light caught my eye. The TV. It had turned on by itself. The screen was filled with the face of a local news anchor, a woman with blonde hair and a serious expression. Officials are still investigating the source of the leak, which originated in a 12th floor unit, she was saying. 5 residents have been hospitalized as a precaution. I didn't care. It was just another glitch, another one of his tricks. I turned my attention back to the door, listening for any sound from the hallway, for the blessed sound of police boots. Then, the audio from the TV changed. The news anchor's voice cut out. It was replaced by a different voice, one that went through me like a jolt of electricity. A voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. Alex, honey, can you hear me? It was my mother's voice. My blood went ice cold. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. The operator's tinny voice kept talking, but I couldn't hear her. I could only hear the TV. Mom? The word was a raw whisper. She was dead. Cancer. I had held her hand as she took her last breath. The voice from the television speakers was gentle, warm. The same voice that had read me bedtime stories. Listen to me, baby, it said. You need to listen to me very carefully. Open the window. The air in here. It isn't good. You need to get some fresh air. My gaze snapped from the TV to the large picture window that overlooked the city. It was sealed shut. It had been since I moved in. I stumbled back, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. This was impossible. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't her. It was him. Using her voice. Stealing her voice. Who is that, sir? Sir? Are you there? Who are you talking to? The voice from the dropped phone sounded distant, panicked. The voice from the TV grew sharp, urgent, losing its gentle edge. It was still my mother's voice, but now it was filled with a desperate command. Her voice, the day I fell off my bike and she screamed for me to get out of the road. Alex, open the window! Now! I didn't think. I reacted. A primal instinct took over, a command from a ghost that bypassed all rational thought. I scrambled for the bat, my hands closing around the cool, solid aluminum. The feel of it was real. It was a weapon. It was a tool. I ran to the window, my fingers scrabbled at the lock, trying to force it. It wouldn't budge. It was painted over, sealed tight against the world. Useless. I can't, I screamed at the TV, at the ghost, at the man on the walls. It's stuck! Break it! The voice commanded. I didn't hesitate. I swung the bat. The sound was a deafening explosion of shattering glass. The thick pane spiderwebbed for a millisecond before imploding, sending a shower of sharp fragments across the floor. A rush of cold night air flooded the room, a clean, sharp blast against my sweaty skin. It tasted like life. I leaned against the frame, gasping, sucking in the air, my lungs burning. Far below, a siren wailed, growing louder and louder. They were coming. Help was coming. The relief lasted for 10 seconds. The sound of my front door splintering was louder than the window breaking. It flew open, slamming against the inside wall, and 2 cops in heavy tactical vests poured in, guns drawn. Police, show me your hands! Drop the weapon! I was still holding the bat. It slipped from my grasp, thudding onto the carpet. I raised my hand slowly, my body shaking uncontrollably. He locked me in, I choked out. He was in the walls. They were a whirlwind of professional motion. One officer kept his gun on me while the other did a quick, methodical sweep of the apartment. He kicked open the bedroom door. He cleared the bathroom. He checked the closets, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The whole search took less than 2 minutes. Clear! He shouted. The first officer lowered his gun, his eyes taking in the scene. The trashed living room. The broken window. Me, standing there in yesterday's clothes, looking like a madman. Sir, there's no one here, he said, his voice flat. But the cameras, I stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the ceiling. The pinholes. He was watching me. He spoke to me, through the TV. My mother's voice. The 2 cops exchanged a look. It was a look I knew I'd be seeing in my nightmares for a long time. Pity. Annoyance. They walked me through it. The official report. No signs of forced entry. Apart from the one they'd just made. No hidden cameras they could find. They saw the smashed picture frame on my desk. They saw the wreckage. They noted my agitated state. The conclusion was unspoken but hung in the air between us, thick and heavy. I was having a breakdown. I had done all of this to myself. They were about to leave. The senior officer gave me a card for a crisis hotline. Get some rest, Mr. Porter, he said, not unkindly, and maybe get that window boarded up. They walked out, their boots crunching on the broken glass. I stood alone in the ruins, the cold wind whipping through my apartment. I was safe. And I had never felt more alone. The younger cop, the one who had cleared the rooms, paused at the doorway. He turned back to look at me, his hand on the splintered doorframe. You know, he said, his voice low. It's weird. We're not supposed to talk about this stuff, but there was a rumor about this unit. The guy who lived here before you. He looked around the room, then back at me. Word is, he died in here. Faulty gas heater. Carbon monoxide poisoning. That's what they said, anyway. He gave me a final, hesitant nod, then turned and was gone, leaving me alone in the sudden, crushing silence. The silence the cops left behind was heavier than the noise they had made. It settled into the apartment like dust, coating the overturned furniture, the shattered lamp, the splinters of the front door. The only sound was the wind, whistling a low, mournful tune through the jagged teeth of the broken window. It was a clean wind, a cold wind. It didn't feel like the air that had been in here moments before. Carbon monoxide poisoning. That's what the young cop said. A faulty gas heater. A rumor. My feet crunched on glass as I walked to my laptop. The crisis hotline card the senior officer had given me lay on the desk. I swept it into the trash. I wasn't crazy. Annoyed. Terrified. Maybe losing my mind. But not crazy. My fingers, still trembling slightly, moved over the keyboard. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Validation, maybe. Proof that I wasn't the one who had ripped my own home apart. I typed in the building's address. Skyview Tower deaths. The search results were mostly bland real estate listings and tenant reviews complaining about the elevators. It was dumb. A random comment from a cop. A rumor. I was about to close the lid when a link caught my eye. It wasn't from a major news site, just a small, local crime blog. The headline was simple. Tragedy at Skyview Tower. The post was a year old. I clicked. The article was short. A young woman was found deceased yesterday in her 34th floor apartment at the exclusive Skyview Tower. Sources close to the investigation, who wish to remain anonymous, suggest the cause of death appears to be suicide. Evidence of a deliberate gas leak from the kitchen stove was found at the scene. The deceased has been identified as Linda Nguyen, 26. Gas leak. Not a faulty heater. Suicide. Not an accident. The cop's rumor was wrong. A small knot of something I couldn't name loosened in my chest. See? A different story. A different person. Just a tragic, but unrelated, event. Then I saw the picture. It was a small, grainy portrait, probably pulled from a social media profile. A young woman, Asian, with long, dark hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. There was something tired in her expression, even while smiling for the camera. I stared at the photo. My blood ran cold. All over again. I knew that face. I'd seen it before. Where? Where the hell had I seen that face? It wasn't a memory. It was a flicker. An image I'd seen recently, in passing. I pushed back from the desk, my chair scraping against the hardwood. My eyes scanned the room, the wreckage. The TV was off. The picture frames were on the floor, face down. Nothing. My gaze fell on the hall closet. The one the landlord had told me was for storage. It was packed with old junk left by the previous tenant. He had said to just toss it. I never did. I pulled the door open. The smell of dust and old paper hit me. Cardboard boxes were stacked almost to the ceiling. I pulled the first one down, ripping the tape off. Old college textbooks. Useless. The next box was full of kitchenware I didn't want. I was about to give up. This was stupid. I was chasing ghosts because a cop told me a story. Then I saw it. At the very back, under a dusty tarp. A smaller box. A banker's box, sealed with old, yellowing tape. It didn't feel like the others. It felt personal. I dragged it into the living room, the wind from the broken window making the flaps of the box shudder. I pried it open. On top was a framed photo, face down. I turned it over. It was Linda Nguyen again, this time with an older couple, all of them smiling at some long-forgotten family gathering. Underneath the photo was a stack of books, and under the books, a navy blue journal with a worn leather cover. I opened it. The first page had a name written in neat cursive script. Linda T. Nguyen. My hands were shaking again. I sat on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and the pieces of a dead woman's life. I flipped through the pages. The early entries were normal. Complaints about work, notes about friends, a new recipe she wanted to try. I skipped toward the end. The transformation was jarring. The neat cursive dissolved into a frantic, jagged scrawl. The pen strokes dug into the paper. October 12th. It moved my keys again. I know I left them on the hook by the door. I always leave them on the hook. Found them inside the refrigerator. This isn't funny anymore. It feels like I'm being tested. October 17th. The TV turned on last night. A nature documentary. About deep-sea fish that live in total darkness. I didn't turn it on. When I went to turn it off, the remote wasn't working. I had to unplug it from the wall. I feel watched. All the time now. October 21st. It talks, not with a voice. Through the speaker. The smart speaker. It plays songs. Songs my dad used to love. He's been gone for years. How could it know that? How? I asked it to stop, and it played a clip from a movie. A man's voice saying, "I'm trying to help you." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was my life. The last 24 hours of my life, written in a dead woman's diary. I kept reading, my eyes flying across the panicked lines. November 2nd. I smashed the speaker. I threw it against the wall. There was silence for a whole day. I thought it was over. Then, tonight, the lights in the kitchen started flickering. On and off, on and off. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. I don't know what it means. It just kept going for an hour. I hid in the bedroom. I think it's angry I broke the speaker. November 8th. It knows I'm writing this. I can feel it. It doesn't like me writing about it. My pen keeps slipping. It's getting cold in here. It's trying to tell me something. It keeps flickering the lights near the kitchen stove. It says it wants to protect me. But protect me from what? What? My breath hitched. The stove. The gas leak. The flicker of an idea, insane and impossible, ignited in my mind. What if it wasn't suicide? I turned to the very last page. The handwriting was barely legible. The letters were huge, sprawling across the lines as if written in the dark by a hand that was losing control. It was the final entry, November 10th. It isn't the enemy. I was wrong. The enemy is the smell, the sweet smell. Sickly sweet every night. It seeps in, makes my head fuzzy, hard to think. The light is flashing again. It's trying to warn me. It knows he's coming back tonight to check his work. The landlord. He told me he fixed the pipe, but the smell is worse. He smiled when he said it. The light is telling me. It says the smell. It comes from... The ink trailed off into a long, messy smear, as if the pen had dropped from her hand. My head shot up. The landlord, the guy who gave me the keys, who had a spare, who told me to just throw this box away. That's when it happened. Click. The desk lamp beside me turned on. It bathed the dusty box and the frantic diary in a stark white light. I froze, every nerve ending screaming. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Flicker. The light went off. Then on again, for a longer moment. Off. On long. On short. It was a pattern. Deliberate. My mind, numb with shock, struggled to catch up. I'd learned it as a kid in Boy Scouts, a useless skill I thought I'd long forgotten. Long, short, Morse, code. It took me a second to decipher the flashes. My mind felt like it was moving through mud. Dot dash, the letter A. Dot dash, dot dot, the letter L. Dot dot dot, the letter E. Dash cross, the letter X. The lamp was blinking my name, A-L-E-X, over and over. It wasn't him. It wasn't the man I'd imagined in the walls. It was her, Linda. She was here. She was the one who had spoken with my mother's voice. She was the one who made me break the window. Open the window. The air in here. It isn't good. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to save me. My wild gaze darted around the room, searching for an explanation, for a source, for anything that made sense in a world that had completely broken apart. I looked at the dark TV screen, the dead phone on the floor, the splintered door. And then my eyes landed on the small, circular smart speaker on my kitchen counter. The one I used to play music and check the weather. The one I had never bothered to set up properly, just leaving all the factory settings as they were, including the default user profile picture on its little screen. A small, grainy portrait. A young woman with long, dark hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The photo from the news article. The photo from the diary. She had been sitting on my counter, watching me, since the day I moved in. My name. The lamp blinked my name. A-L-E-X. The light died and stayed dead. Silence flooded the room, so complete it felt like a sound in itself, a low hum that vibrated behind my eyeballs. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, surrounded by the glittering debris of my shattered life. My gaze was fixed on the small, unassuming smart speaker on the kitchen counter. On its tiny screen, her face. The one from the crime blog. The one from the dusty photo frame. Linda Nguyen. It was her. All of it. The voice on the phone that sounded like my mother. The smashed window. The flicker of the lights. She wasn't trying to scare me. She wasn't trying to hurt me. My brain felt like a circuit board doused in water, shorting out, firing off sparks in random, useless directions. A ghost. A goddamn ghost. It was the kind of thing you'd laugh at someone for saying. The kind of thing that gets you a padded room and a plastic cup of pills. But the frantic scribbles in the diary were real. The blinking lamp was real. The cold dread seeping into my bones was absolutely real. I cleared my throat. The sound a dry rasp in the quiet. My voice came out thin. A stranger's voice. "Linda?" I said to the empty air. My eyes were locked on the speaker. "Is that you? What do you want?" Nothing. The speaker's screen remained unchanged, her static portrait gazing back with those tired eyes. The wind whistled through the broken window, a lonely, hollow sound. Disappointment, sharp and stupid, pricked at me. Of course. What did I expect? A voice from beyond? A spectral hand to pat my shoulder? I was talking to myself in a wrecked apartment, clutching a dead woman's diary. Maybe the cops were right. Maybe the gas had gotten to me. Maybe I was just crazy. I let my head fall back against the leg of an overturned chair, staring at the ceiling. The water stain in the corner I'd been meaning to complain about looked like a distorted face. Everything looked like something it wasn't. Then I heard it. A new sound. Not the wind. Not the far-off city hum. It was inside the apartment with me. Whir. My head shot up. The sound was coming from the corner of the room, from the small desk where I'd put my second-hand printer, the one I'd used maybe twice since moving in. Clunk, shh. It was the sound of the paper feed engaging. The machine, which had been off, unplugged for all I knew, was coming to life. Its internal lights glowed a faint green. It groaned like an old man getting out of a chair. I watched, frozen, as a single clean sheet of white paper began to inch its way out of the tray. The process was agonizingly slow. The whirring of the motors, the slight tremor of the machine's plastic body, the agonizingly slow crawl of the paper as the print head moved back and forth, spitting tiny jets of ink. It was the most terrifying, mundane thing I had ever witnessed. It was an office chore from hell. The paper finally dropped into the output tray with a soft thump. Silence again. I didn't move. I just stared at that one white sheet. It seemed to glow in the dim light of the room. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. My breath was shallow. This was it. A message. The sign. Slowly, I pushed myself to my feet. Glass crunched under my shoes. I walked toward the desk, each step heavy, deliberate. I was afraid of what I would find. My name? A threat. A drawing. I reached the desk and looked down. The page wasn't filled with text. It wasn't a frantic scrawl. It was a single line, printed in the default Arial font, clean, impersonal, chillingly direct. Check the air vent. My eyes read the words once, twice. I looked back at the printer. It was dark again, inert, as if it had never been on. I looked back at the paper. The ink was so black, so final. Check the air vent. Which one? There were two. A small one in the bedroom, and the main intake vent high on the living room wall. A large metal grill near the ceiling. It had to be the main one. Everything happened out here. I dragged a dining chair from the wreckage, its legs scraping loudly across the floor. The sound was obscene in the charged silence. I positioned it under the vent and climbed up, my sneakers unsteady on the upholstered seat. The vent was just out of reach. I stood on my toes, my fingers brushing the cool, dusty metal of the grill. It was held in place by two flathead screws, caked in years of off-white paint, but simple enough. I got down, rummaged through the kitchen drawer where I threw all the miscellaneous junk, and found a butter knife. It would have to do. Back on the wobbly chair, I worked at the first screw. The paint flaked away. The knife's dull edge kept slipping out of the groove. I cursed, my knuckles scraping against the wall. Finally, with a painful groan of metal, the screw turned. Then the second. I pulled the grill away from the wall. It came free with a puff of dust that made me sneeze. I held the grill in one hand, peering into the dark, rectangular maw of the duct. I expected to see dust bunnies, maybe a cobweb or two, the usual guts of an old building. It wasn't dust. The inside of the vent was coated in something thick, black, and wet. It looked like a patch of diseased velvet, glistening faintly in the ambient light from the street below. It spread across the bottom of the duct and crept up the sides, a living darkness that seemed to breathe. It was mold, a horrifying, biblical amount of it. My stomach turned. The air suddenly felt thick, heavy, like I was breathing through a wet cloth, and nestled right in the middle of that disgusting black patch was something else. It was a small, white plastic device, a little box no bigger than a pack of cards, with a single red light that blinked. On, off, on, off. A steady, electronic heartbeat in the rot. Wires ran from it, disappearing deeper into the duct. What the hell was that? An exterminator's device? Some kind of sensor? I reached in, my fingers hesitating just above the black sludge. I couldn't touch it. I just couldn't. I used the tip of the butter knife, hooking it under the plastic edge of the device, and carefully dragging it toward me. It slid through the mold with a wet, sick sound. I got it to the edge and picked it up, trying to touch as little of it as possible. It was light. I turned it over in my hand. It was a plug-in automated air freshener. A cheap brand, the kind you buy at a gas station. The back had two prongs, which had been plugged into a cleverly hidden electrical outlet installed deep inside the air duct. The bottom of the device held a small glass vial for the scented oil. The vial was almost empty. A smell hit me, not the musty smell of the mold. A different smell. Sweet. Cloyingly sweet. Artificial. I knew that smell. I'd smelled it before, faint and fleeting, over the past few weeks. I'd always dismissed it. Fabric softener from the laundry room downstairs. A neighbor's perfume. My brain found a dozen logical reasons for it. My eyes went wide. The diary. Linda's last entry. The enemy is the smell. The sweet smell. Sickly sweet, every night. It seeps in. Makes my head fuzzy. Hard to think. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't just a smell. It was a delivery system. It was a weapon. As if on cue, the smart speaker on the counter chirped. It was a sharp electronic ping. Then a voice spoke. Not Linda. Not my mother. It was the default robotic female voice of the device itself. Clear, calm, and utterly devoid of emotion. Warning. Airborne concentration of Stachybotrys chartarum has exceeded recommended safety limits. Prolonged exposure is hazardous. Evacuation is advised. The words hung in the air. Stachybotrys chartarum, the scientific name for toxic black mold. The butter knife slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the floor. I was still standing on the chair, holding the small white device in my hand. I looked from the device to the horrifying black garden growing inside my wall, then back to the device. It all crashed down on me at once. Every piece. The diary, the smell, the paranoid entries about moved keys and flickering lights, Linda smashing the speaker because it was trying to warn her. The landlord's smiling face. He told me he fixed the pipe, but the smell is worse. Linda didn't commit suicide. She was murdered. Slowly, patiently, poisoned by the air in her own apartment. The gas leak the cops found wasn't a suicide attempt. It was a cover story. Maybe a final, clumsy attempt by the killer when the mold was taking too long. Or maybe an attempt by Linda herself to end it, driven mad by the spores and the gaslighting. This wasn't a haunted house. It was a crime scene, a carefully engineered trap. And the landlord, the friendly guy who gave me the keys and told me to just toss the previous tenant's junk, had reset the trap. He'd put in a new tenant, me. He fixed the faulty heater for me. He smiled. He knew the mold was there. He knew the diffuser was there, aerosolizing the spores, pumping them into every breath I took. The headaches I'd been having. The fogginess I'd blamed on work stress. It was the mold. It was the poison. I wasn't the next target. I was already the victim. The process had already begun. The only reason I was still standing here, The only reason I wasn't a confused, paranoid mess scribbling in a diary was because of her. Because Linda's ghost, somehow tethered to this place, had fought back. She'd tried to get me out. She'd broken the window to get fresh air in. She'd used the gadgets of her own murder to save my life. The realization was a physical blow. I stumbled off the chair, landing hard on my feet amidst the glass. I was breathing her air. I was living in her tomb. And he would be back to check on his work. My lungs burned. I was breathing poison. I was standing in a tomb. The thought wasn't a thought, it was a physical jolt. A cattle prod to the base of my skull. I scrambled backwards, away from the yawning black hole in the wall, my shoes grinding on broken glass. Fresh air. I needed fresh air. I stumbled to the shattered window, gulping at the night, the city haze tasting like salvation. He was going to kill me. The slow, quiet way. The way that leaves no fingerprints, just a coroner's shrug and a verdict of suicide or accidental overdose. The friendly landlord. Mr. Henderson. The man who'd fixed my faulty heater. My mind ignited. A chaotic firestorm of connections. Linda's diary. He smiled. The headaches. Makes my head fuzzy. The smell. The enemy is the smell. He would be back. To check his work. To see if his new tenant was getting suitably confused. Suitably depressed. Ready to be nudged toward the gas stove. No, not this time. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, cut through the fog. I had to move. I had to think. The cops were at dead end. They'd listened to Henderson, not Linda. They wouldn't listen to me. I had one chance. Evidence. I spun around, my eyes scanning the wreckage of my apartment. The printer. The single sheet of paper. Check the air vent. My gaze snapped to the small white device in my hand. The poison dispenser. I ran to the kitchen, yanking open a drawer, my hands fumbling through takeout menus and rubber bands until I found a box of Ziploc bags. I dropped the air freshener inside, sealing it shut. The plastic felt dirty, contaminated. I placed it on the counter, then grabbed my phone. The flash was brutal, each picture a stark, clinical record of the crime scene. The black, glistening mold inside the vent. The cleverly hidden power outlet. The sheet of paper from the printer. The Ziploc bag. Proof. Tangible proof. My hands shook, but I forced them steady. I documented everything. What now? Run? Disappear into the night? He knew who I was. He had my driver's license, my social security number. He could find me. Running was a delay, not a solution. I had to face him. Not him, not directly. I had to go over his head. Or at least, to the person who was supposed to be in charge of this whole goddamn building. The management. The people who hired him. I remembered the orientation packet. A name. A face. Mr. Davies. Head of the resident board. An older man, always in a slightly too tight suit. A permanent, vaguely political smile plastered on his face. I'd seen him in the lobby. He seemed like the kind of man who hated problems. Hated messes. He would have to listen. He represented the building, the corporation that owned it. They wouldn't want a murder lawsuit on their hands. That was the plan. It was thin, it was desperate. It was all I had. I grabbed the Ziploc bag, my keys, and my phone. I didn't bother locking the door. What was the point? The monster was already inside. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. The beige walls seemed to press in on me. Every flicker of the overhead fluorescent lights was a threat. Every distant rumble of the elevator felt like an approaching footstep. I walked quickly, my sneakers silent on the worn carpet. I didn't take the elevator. No enclosed spaces. I took the stairs. The building management office was on the ground floor, past the laundry room and a sad-looking vending machine. The lights were on. A good sign. I pushed the glass door open. The little bell above it chimed, a cheerful, stupid sound. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and industrial-strength cleaner. Mr. Davies was there, sitting behind a large mahogany desk. He looked up from his computer, and a practiced smile clicked into place. Alex, isn't it? Apartment 7B. I heard you had some, excitement last night. A broken window? His voice was smooth, a layer of concern spread thin over a slab of sheer disinterest. "Probably a system glitch with those new smart locks. Don't you worry, son. We'll have our technician take a look first thing tomorrow. Can't have our residents feeling unsafe." The polite, dismissive tone made my skin crawl. He was already writing it off. A glitch. Bad luck. "It wasn't a glitch," I said. My voice was tight. I stepped forward, placing the Ziploc bag on the polished surface of his desk. It was this. Mr. Davies's smile faltered for a microsecond. He looked down at the bag, at the small white device nestled inside. He didn't touch it. "What's this?" I found it in my air vent. The main intake. It was plugged into a hidden outlet. I pulled out my phone, swiped to the first picture, and laid it next to the bag. The vent is full of toxic black mold. This device was aerosolizing it, pumping it into my apartment. I watched his face for a flicker of shock. Horror. Anything. Nothing. The smile returned. A little more strained this time. He squinted at the phone screen. "Well, I'll be. That's certainly not up to code. Must be some old junk the previous tenant left behind. People leave the strangest things." He reached for the Ziploc bag, his movements casual, natural. "Here, let me take care of this for you. I'll have maintenance up there tomorrow morning to scrub that vent out completely. We'll get it sorted." His fingers closed around the bag. The trap sprung. His words were placating, but his grip was firm. He was trying to take my evidence, my only leverage. "No," I said, my voice coming out louder than I intended. "I think I'll hold on to it." I put my hand on the bag, trying to pull it back. His fingers tightened. The smile stayed plastered on his face, but his eyes, they went cold. Utterly, terrifyingly cold. It was like watching a light switch get flipped off behind his pupils. The friendly building manager vanished, and something else looked out. "Son," he said, his voice dropping to a low, confidential tone. I said, "Let me handle it." The strength in his hand was shocking. He wasn't a soft old man in a cheap suit. He was wiry, strong. His knuckles were white. We were in a silent, desperate tug of war over a plastic bag on a desk. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was wrong. This was all wrong. He was in on it. He had to be. He was part of it. My breath hitched. My mind screamed, "Let go! Run! Get out of the office! Now!" But my hand wouldn't obey. This was everything. Without this, I was just another crazy tenant with a story. He leaned in closer, the smell of coffee on his breath, the smile now a predatory baring of teeth. "I'm not going to ask you again." Ping. The sound was sharp, electronic. It came from the corner of the room. We both froze. On a small credenza sat an old, boxy television. It was off, but the small red power light was on. It blinked. Once. Twice. Then it began to pulse. A frantic, rhythmic beat. On, off, on, off, on, off. A wild, electronic heartbeat filling the tense silence of the room. Mr. Davies's head snapped toward the TV. The color drained from his face. For the first time, the mask of control shattered completely, replaced by a flash of raw, naked fear. He looked at the blinking light like it was the barrel of a gun. In that instant, his grip on the bag slackened. I didn't hesitate. I yanked my hand back, clutching the Ziploc bag to my chest like a holy relic. The TV screen, which had been black, flickered to life, not with a broadcast channel, but with the grainy, black and white feed from a security camera. The angle was high, from a corner of the ceiling. It showed us. It showed the desk. It showed our struggle. It was a live feed of the office we were standing in. Linda. She was watching. Mr. Davies stared at the screen, at our silent movie selves frozen in a moment of conflict. He looked at me, his eyes wide, no longer cold, but filled with a new kind of emotion, a panicked, cornered animal look. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. He straightened up, pulling at the lapels of his suit jacket. He let out a short, sharp breath. The smile didn't come back. "Fine," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all its earlier warmth. "Keep it. Do what you want." He turned his back on me, walking stiffly to his desk chair. He sat down and began shuffling a stack of papers, his movements jerky, robotic. He refused to look at me. He refused to look at the television, which had gone dark again, its red light now a steady single point in the gloom. But I saw it. His hands, the ones that had been so strong just a moment ago. They were shaking. I didn't run. I flew. My legs were pistons. My lungs were on fire, and the only thought in my head was the cold, dead look in Mr. Davies's eyes. He wasn't just a manager. He was part of it. He was a gatekeeper for the monster. The stairwell was a concrete blur. I took the steps 3 at a time, the Ziploc bag clutched in my fist, the plastic crumpled against my sweaty palm. My proof. My everything. I hit the 7th floor landing and sprinted down the hall. My apartment door was still ajar, a black slash in the beige wall. I slammed it shut. The sound echoed in the sudden quiet. I twisted the deadbolt, heard the heavy chunk as it shot home. I fumbled with the chain lock, my fingers clumsy, shaking. It rattled into its slot. Locked. Safe. For how long? I leaned my back against the door, my chest heaving. I was catching my breath. The silence of the apartment felt different now. It wasn't empty. I knew it wasn't. My gaze swept the wrecked room, the shattered window, the overturned lamp, the black maw of the air vent. This place wasn't a home. It was a hunting ground, and I was the prey. But I wasn't alone. Linda, I whispered to the air. The name felt heavy on my tongue. You saved me. Down there. The TV. My voice sounded small. Useless. They're together. Henderson and Davies. They wanted me to think I was crazy, just like they did to you. I pushed myself off the door, pacing the small living room. Adrenaline was a drug, making every shadow move, every sound a threat. We have to do something. They'll come for me. They know I have this. I held up the bag. What do we do? What's the plan? I looked at the dark TV screen, then at the printer. Can you help me? Show me something. Silence. The hum of the refrigerator. The distant siren cutting through the city night. I was talking to a ghost in a trashed apartment. Maybe I was going crazy. My old tablet was on the coffee table, buried under a stack of mail. I hadn't touched it in months. The battery was dead for sure. The screen lit up. I froze mid-step. A cold shock went down my spine, a jolt of ice water in my veins. The screen wasn't just on. It glowed with a pale, white light. A simple drawing application was open, the kind a child would use. A blank white canvas. As I watched, a black line appeared. It drew itself, shaky and slow, a wobbly rectangle. Then more lines, bisecting it. Hallways. Smaller squares. A floor plan. It was a crude, simple map of this floor. My floor. My breath caught in my throat. A dot appeared, blinking, in one of the squares. 7B. My apartment. Then the line moved again, crawling across the screen with a painful slowness. It snaked down the hallway, past the bank of elevators, all the way to the far end, to the last apartment on the right. The line stopped. Then, a new shape began to form inside the last square. A rough, angry X, scratched over and over, a dark, messy blot on the screen. Underneath it, letters started to appear. Jagged, uneven, like a hand struggling to hold a pen. 1, 2, 0, 8. Apartment 1208. What was in 1208? What did she want me to find? Henderson's apartment? Davies's? A chill went through me. He said he lived off-site, but that could have been a lie. Everything was a lie. I had to go. I had to see what was in there. It was the only lead I had. But going out there now, into the hallway where they could be waiting, it was suicide. I stared at the door, at the comforting solidity of the deadbolt and chain. Here I was trapped. Out there, I was exposed. I hesitated. My mind raced. What could be in there that was so important? Evidence? Another body? Mind chain. Ping, the sound was soft, but in the tense quiet, it was as loud as a gunshot. It came from my laptop on the desk. A new email. I walked over, my heart a heavy drum against my ribs. My hands were slick with sweat as I touched the trackpad. The screen lit up. It was from the building management's official address, the one Davies used. From H. Davies, Building Management. Subject, urgent. Scheduled maintenance, floor 12. My blood ran cold. I clicked it open. Dear residents of the 12th floor, Please be advised that urgent maintenance will be conducted on your floor this evening, starting at 10 p.m. This will include a full electrical shutdown for system diagnostics and mandatory pest control fumigation for all units. Our technicians will require access. We apologize for the short notice and any inconvenience this may cause. Sincerely, H. Davies. My eyes shot to the clock in the corner of the screen. 9:48 p.m. I read it again. Floor 12. But I was on 7. He sent it to the wrong person? No, this wasn't a mistake. This was a message. A threat. Apartments. 12. And 08. 1208. Pest control. The words hit me like a physical blow. The poison. The vent. They weren't just going to fix a vent, they were going to gas the whole apartment. They were going to recreate what they did to Linda, but this time there'd be no mystery. Just a dead man in a fumigated room. A tragic accident. They were coming. Not just for me. For whatever was in 1208. And they were coming now. The plan was clear. They would clear out 1208 first, remove whatever evidence was there. Then they'd come for me. The pest. I had to get there first. Knock, knock, knock. I jumped back from the desk, a choked sound escaping my throat. The knock was sharp, polite. At my door. I crept forward, my body low, my eye pressed against the peephole. The distorted fisheye lens showed me the hallway. It showed me Mr. Davies. His thin, fake smile was gone. His face was a hard mask. He wasn't alone. Next to him stood 2 men. Big men. They wore the dark blue coveralls of a cleaning or maintenance crew. On their backs, they wore large metal canisters with hoses and nozzles. Fumigators. Their faces were blank, impassive. They looked strong. Mr. Miller? Davies's voice was muffled but clear through the thick wood. It was friendly. Too friendly. Alex, it's Mr. Davies from the office. We have the maintenance team here for the emergency pest service. Just need you to open up so we can get to work. I held my breath, flattening myself against the wall beside the door. Silence. Don't make a sound. Don't breathe. Alex, I know you're in there. His voice hardened. The fake kindness evaporated. The whole floor is being serviced. We have a master key. It's easier if you just open the door. A master key. Son of a bitch. I could hear the jingle of keys from the other side. A metallic scratching sound as one was inserted into the lock. The bottom lock clicked open. My deadbolt was the only thing holding the door now. Thump! A heavy shoulder hit the wood. The door shuddered in its frame. Open the door, kid. Don't make this difficult. Thump! Louder this time. The wood groaned. The deadbolt would not hold for long. They were coming in. I was out of time. I had seconds. I scrambled back from the door, my eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape. There was none. The hallway was death. The front door was a death sentence. I looked at the shattered window. The cold night air. The drop. My gaze snapped back to the tablet on the coffee table. A new drawing was on the screen. It was even more frantic than the last. A stick figure. It was on a balcony. Its arms were stretched out, reaching for the next balcony over. A desperate leap across the void. And beneath the crude drawing, one final, shaky message. She did it too. Thump. The doorframe screamed. Wood splintered somewhere near the lock. My heart tried to beat its way out of my chest. My brain was just static, a high-pitched whine of pure terror. Alex, last chance! Davis's voice was a drill sergeant's bark now, all pretense gone. We have a schedule to keep. Thump. Crack! The deadbolt was giving up. I saw the thick metal distort, pulling away from the wood. One more hit. Maybe 2. My eyes darted from the buckling door to the shattered window. Death here, or death there. A choice. What a fucking choice. My gaze fell on the tablet again. The stick figure on the balcony. The words burning into my retinas. She did it too. This is insane. The thought was sharp and clear in the middle of the panic. This is how I die. A crazy leap into the dark based on a ghost's drawing. Boom! The door flew inward, the deadbolt ripped clean from the frame, It crashed against the far wall. The chain lock, my last pathetic line of defense, snapped like a cheap piece of jewelry. I didn't wait to see them. I was already moving. I scrambled over the overturned coffee table, my feet crunching on glass. I threw myself at the balcony door, wrenched it open, and stumbled out into the night. The wind hit me like a solid wall. A seventh-floor wind, cold and full of the city's exhaust. It tore the breath from my lungs and tried to push me back inside. Far below, the streetlights were a smear of yellow and white. Cars were silent, crawling insects. "He's on the balcony!" A voice from inside my apartment. Not Davies. Someone rougher. This was it. No more thinking. My hands, slick with sweat, grabbed the cold, wet metal of the railing. It was thinner than it looked. My knuckles went white. I swung one leg over, then the other. I was on the outside now. Nothing between me and the long drop but the strength of my own grip. "Don't be a fool, kid," Davy shouted, his voice closer now. "There's nowhere to go!" He was wrong. There was one place. I wouldn't let myself look down. I looked at the next balcony over. Apartment 707. It seemed a mile away. An impossible gap. The message on the tablet wasn't just a suggestion. It was a command. A path. She did it. Linda did it. She had to have been just as scared as I was. Maybe more. I took a deep breath that tasted like metal and rain. I shifted my weight, my slick dress shoes finding a tiny, precarious lip on the concrete edge. I reached out with my right hand, stretching, my shoulder screaming in protest. My fingers brushed the cold surface of the next railing. They slipped. A gasp escaped my throat. For a second, my center of gravity was nowhere, suspended over the abyss. I swung my body, a clumsy, desperate pendulum. My fingers caught the railing again, this time closing around the bar. A solid grip. I held on with the strength of pure fear. My other hand let go of my own balcony. I was hanging now, my feet dangling in the empty air. The sound of my own ragged breathing was loud in my ears, louder than the wind. My feet found the concrete edge of 707's balcony. I hauled myself over, collapsing onto the cold, gritty floor. I lay there for a second, my cheek pressed against the rough surface, my chest heaving. I was alive. I pushed myself up. No time. They'd see me. They'd just go in 707 and grab me. I had to keep going. The next leap was easier. I didn't hesitate. I just moved. Balcony 707 to 708. Over the railing, a controlled swing, a hard landing. My muscles were screaming, but the adrenaline was afire in my veins. This was the one. Linda's apartment. Apartment 1208. The X on the map. I moved to the sliding glass door. It looked dark, locked. I put my hand on the handle, expecting to find it sealed tight. It slid open with a soft, metallic whisper. It was not locked. She left it for me. Or for herself, a ghost's escape route, left open for years. I slipped inside. The air hit me immediately. It was cold, stale, the smell of dust, and something else. Something like old clothes and damp earth. The apartment was completely dark. I slid the glass door shut behind me, the soft click echoing in the dead quiet. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I thumbed the screen on, hitting the flashlight icon. A brilliant white beam cut through the blackness. The beam swept across the room. It was nearly empty. No couch, no TV, no life, just dust bunnies huddled in the corners like frightened animals. A thick layer of dust covered everything, sparkling in the flashlight's beam. How long had it been since anyone lived here? My own apartment door was being smashed in. They were searching for me. How long until they figured out where I went? How long until they started checking the neighbors? My light fell on something in the center of the living room. It was the only piece of furniture there. A large, gray, metal filing cabinet. The kind you see in old offices. It looked out of place. It looked important. I rushed to it, my sneakers silent on the thin, grimy carpet. The 4 drawers were locked. A single combination dial was set above the handle of the top drawer. Of course, a scraping sound from the hallway outside. My blood ran cold. I killed my flashlight, plunging the room into absolute blackness. I held my breath, listening. My ears strained against the silence. Clank. It was the sound of a key, fumbling for a lock. Not this door. The one next to it. 707. Click. The lock turned. The door to 707 opened with a groan of old hinges. I heard 2 sets of heavy footsteps step inside. Not here, an unfamiliar voice grunted. Check the balcony. Shit. They were smart. I backed away from the cabinet, pressing myself flat against the far wall. I could hear them on the balcony next door. The sliding door opening. Nothing. He must still be in his place. Davy said to check them all. Floor-wide fumigation, remember? We need access to all units. That's the story. The voices were muffled but clear. They were so close. I was in a box, and they were right outside. The sliding door of 707 closed. The apartment door groaned shut. The lock clicked. A moment of silence. Then the footsteps moving down the hall. They were coming here. Right here. To 1208. I scrambled back to the filing cabinet, fumbling for my phone. My light came on again, a trembling circle on the metal. The combination lock. It needed a code. What code? My mind raced. 1208? Her old apartment number? No, that didn't make sense. I didn't have time to guess. I could hear the jingle of keys right outside the door. They were here. Think. What did she show me, Manasar? The tablet. The drawing. The map. My light beam trembled on the lock. My phone screen was still on, showing my home screen. Flicker. The flashlight went out. Then it came back on. One quick pulse. Then off again. What the hell? My battery? Cough core. Flicker. 4 quick pulses of light. A pause. The beam held steady for a second. Then, flicker. 2 pulses. Another pause. My heart stopped. This wasn't a malfunction. This was a message. My eyes were glued to the phone, waiting. Flicker. 8 pulses. 4, 2, 8. 4, 2, 8. The sound of the key sliding into the lock of apartment 1208 was deafening. A metallic scratch that vibrated through the floor, up my legs, into my teeth. My fingers were numb, clumsy. I spun the dial on the cabinet. Right to 4, past 0 once, left to 2, right to 8. My hand was on the handle. I was out of time. The doorknob turned. I pulled. With a heavy, final thunk, the lock inside the cabinet disengaged. The door opened just as the main apartment door swung inward, flooding the dusty entrance with the bland, yellow light of the hallway. I didn't look. I ripped open the top drawer. It wasn't money. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't anything I expected. It was files. Stacks and stacks of manila folders, crammed in tight. Each had a name and an apartment number typed on the tab. I grabbed the one on top. Brennan, C. APT 1214. I flipped it open. Inside was a copy of a lease agreement, a move-in form, and behind that, stapled together, were other documents, medical reports, lab results. I scanned them, the flashlight beam shaking, the words swimming before my eyes. Patient complains of persistent coughing, headaches, disorientation. Test results show elevated levels of airborne neurotoxins. Diagnosis: acute chemical pneumonitis. Severe neurological degradation. My eyes fell to the last page. It wasn't a medical form. It was a standardized building management document. An internal memo. A single line of text was checked off. At the bottom, a space for the reason. Lease status. Terminated. Reason. And written in neat bureaucratic handwriting in the space below were 3 simple, horrifying words. Tenant is deceased. My blood turned to ice. My hands were shaking so hard the papers rattled. I dropped the folder back into the drawer. It landed with a soft thud on top of dozens, maybe hundreds, of others. My light fell on the next tab. Garcia, M. APT 1202. Then Peterson, J. APT 1221. All on this floor, the 12th floor. This wasn't about me. It was never about me. I wasn't the target. I was just the next name on the list. The pest control wasn't a threat. It was a business model. I heard a footstep behind me. Slow. Heavy. Found him. The voice was flat, devoid of emotion, the kind of voice that announces a train delay or reads a court verdict. It came from a big man, built like a refrigerator, who filled the doorway completely. He wore a simple, gray coverall, the kind a janitor or an exterminator would wear. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed on the open filing cabinet, and his eyes flicked to the scattered folders on the floor around my feet. Found him. My muscles locked up. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to fight, to do something, but my body refused to obey. My brain was a frantic storm of images. The splintered door of my own apartment, the impossible leap between balconies, the files in my hand. The files. Tenant is deceased. This was the man who made that happen. This was the cleaner. My phone was still in my hand, its light illuminating the horror show. My thumb, acting on its own, found the camera icon. I wasn't thinking about evidence or justice. It was a primal urge to record, to prove this was real. My hand trembled, but I started snapping pictures. Click! 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 The fake shutter sound was obscenely loud in the quiet room. Photos of the files, the lease agreements, the medical reports, the termination notices. This wasn't a stalker. This wasn't a random break-in. This was a corporation. A system, a machine that chewed up tenants and spit out empty apartments. For profit? For some sick experiment? A wave of nausea washed over me. What was worse, being murdered for money or being a lab rat in a cage you paid rent for? The man in the doorway took a slow step inside. He didn't rush. He didn't have to. The door to the hallway was behind him, the only way out. Behind me was a glass door leading to a 7-story drop. I was cornered. My light fell back into the drawer as I fumbled, trying to keep the phone steady. My eyes caught another tab, one that was slightly different from the others. It wasn't a person's name. It was typed in a cold, official font. Project Chimera, Test Subject 01NT Linda. My breath hitched. Linda. The woman from the drawing. The ghost in the machine. Beside it was another file, newer, the manila folder still crisp. The name on the tab made the air leave my lungs in a painful rush. Project Chimera. Test Subject 02A Collins. My name. Alex Collins. With shaking fingers, I pulled my own file out. It was thinner than the others. A move-in picture of me, smiling and oblivious, clipped to the front. Behind it, a sheet of notes. Subject exhibits high psychological resistance to initial airborne stimuli. Memory and cognitive functions remain largely intact, despite elevated levels of aerosolized stachybotrys. Standard gaslighting protocols initiated via smart home integration have limited effect. Gaslighting. They were calling it a protocol. The flickering lights, the thermostat changes, the whispers from the speakers. It was all in a memo. Then I saw the final note, added recently. Recommendation. Increased dosage. Observe enhanced interaction with memory echo. Codename Linda. Subject's belief in the supernatural may provide a vector for psychological breakdown where direct methods have failed. My mind reeled. It snapped into a horrific new focus. Linda. She wasn't a ghost. Not in the way I understood it. She was a memory echo. A psychic stain left on the apartment by a traumatic death. A variable they hadn't fully accounted for. A glitch in their sick system. She wasn't trying to scare me. The flickering flashlight, the code for the lock. She was trying to warn me. She was using the same network they used to torture us, fighting back from beyond the grave. Her echo was battling their system. Boom, 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 a heavy official pounding on the apartment door. My head snapped up. I looked past the big man, who hadn't moved another inch, just watching me with dead eyes. Building management, a new voice called from the hallway. Cheerful, professional. We're here for the scheduled pest control service in Unit 1208. We need to access the apartment. My blood ran cold. The man in gray didn't even flinch. It was a script. A performance for any neighbors that might be listening. They were letting me know the game was over. They were coming in, one way or another. The pretense of it all was the most terrifying part. They would break down the door, drag me out, and the official report would say I had a psychotic break, that I was a danger to myself and others. Another lease terminated. I was out of time. There was nowhere to go. I was in a tomb. I slammed the filing cabinet drawer shut. The sound echoed with a clang of finality. The big man took another step. I scrambled backward, my eyes darting around the dusty, empty room. Window, wall, door, a box, a trap, flicker. In the corner of the room, an old, boxy television set, the kind with a deep back and a thick glass screen, suddenly came to life, not with a picture, but with a blinding flash of static, accompanied by a high-pitched electronic scream. My eyes locked onto it. The static coalesced, forming lines. It wasn't a TV show. It was a diagram, a blueprint, simple white lines on a black background. It showed the layout of the apartment, my apartment, 1208. A single line was colored, a pulsating, vibrant red. It started from a square marked on the floor right in front of me, snaked down through the floor, and ran vertically toward the bottom of the screen, where a single word flashed. Basement. The ventilation system. It was her, Linda. A final, desperate message. The sound from the hallway changed. No more knocking. Now it was a sharp, metallic scraping sound. A lockpick. Or a drill. The whine was faint but unmistakable. They weren't waiting for an invitation. I looked down at the floor. An old, metal grate was set into the grimy carpet, right where the diagram indicated. I dropped to my knees, my fingers clawing at its edges. It was screwed down tight. I had nothing. No tools, no knife, nothing. My hands were raw and bleeding from the balcony climb. My frantic eyes scanned the floor. My flashlight beam cut across something half-hidden under the edge of the carpet near the wall. A thin, flat piece of metal. A pry bar, left behind by the last work crew who had been in here to strip the place after Linda died. I snatched it up. The metal was cold and heavy. I jammed the flat end under the edge of the grate. The sound of the drill at the door got louder, more insistent. I put all my weight on the bar. The metal groaned. The screws fought back, screeching in protest. My muscles screamed. The taste of copper filled my mouth. Snap! The first screw ripped out of the old floorboards. Crack! The drill bit punched through the door's lock cylinder. A small spray of wood dust and metal shavings puffed into the room. The doorknob began to turn. I gave one last, desperate heave on the pry bar. With a final, echoing screech, the grate tore free from the floor. It flipped over, landing with a heavy clang on the carpet. A blast of foul air hit me in the face. It was the smell of a century of rot, damp concrete, rust, decay, and something else. The sickly sweet smell of chemical waste. The opening was small, dark. A black, unforgiving square leading down into nothing. The apartment door swung open. I didn't look. I didn't wait. I swung my legs over the edge and dropped into the hole. The rough edges of the sheet metal duct scraped my back and sides. It was a tight fit, forcing the air from my lungs. My feet found no purchase. I just fell a few feet before my shoulders wedged me in place. Darkness. Absolute and total. The smell was overpowering, thick enough to taste. My cheek was pressed against the cold, greasy metal. Above me I heard the heavy thud of boots on the apartment floor. Light from the hallway spilled into the room, but none of it reached me. I was in the walls. I was in the guts of the building. I had escaped the room only to crawl into a coffin. The darkness was a physical thing. It pressed in, thick and choking, smelling of rust and decay. I was a worm in the metal guts of the building. My back and arms screamed, shredded by the sharp edges of the duct entrance. Every breath was a fight against the foul, chemical-laced air that tasted like old pennies and poison. Above me, heavy boots hit the floor of apartment 1204. Thump, thump, thump. The sound was muted, but it vibrated through the metal and into my bones. A voice, low and emotionless. The janitor. He's not here. Another voice, the cheerful one from the hallway. The grate's torn off. He went into the vents. A pause. I held my breath, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. My cheek was slick with grease and sweat against the cold duct wall. Check it! The janitor's voice rumbled. He can't have gone far. Panic seized me. I had to move. Now! I tried to crawl, scraping my knees on pop rivets and seams. It was a miserable, claustrophobic shuffle. The duct was barely wide enough for my shoulders. Move. Stop. Breathe. The sound of my own clothes, my own skin, against the metal was a deafening roar in the tight space. Which way? Left? Right? It was a tomb. A maze. A dead end. I was a rat, and the exterminators were coming. Flicker. Ahead of me, in the pitch black, a tiny red light blinked once. It was on a small, square junction box, screwed to the side of the shaft. A maintenance light, maybe. It blinked again. A soft, steady pulse. This way. It was her. Linda. How? It didn't matter. I had a direction. I pushed forward, inching my way toward the pulsing light. The sounds from above faded as I moved deeper into the network. The air changed. The simple smell of rot was joined by a sterile ozone hum, the kind that comes from powerful electronics. This wasn't just a ventilation system. It was a bundle of conduits. Thick power cables ran alongside the duct, roped together like metal pythons. Fiber optic lines, glowing with faint, captured light, snaked through the darkness. This whole goddamn building was a machine. A laboratory. And I was the rat that had gotten loose. The red light at the junction box went dark. For a second, I was plunged back into absolute blackness. My heart sank. Did I lose her? Then, 20 feet ahead, another light blinked to life. Green this time. It was at a T-junction in the shaft. Turn right. I obeyed. I was following a ghost's breadcrumbs through a high-tech hell. Each blinking light was a message, a lifeline. It was also a confirmation of the nightmare. This was planned. The wiring, the ducts, the systems. They were all integrated. This building wasn't built for people to live in. It was built to observe them, to control them. The gaslighting protocol, the smart home manipulation Linda, was using their own network against them. A glitch in their matrix fighting back. I crawled for what felt like an hour, my body screaming in protest. My muscles burned. My skin was raw. The path twisted and turned, leading me steadily downward. The air grew colder. Finally, I came to a stop. The duct ended in a wide, vertical shaft, and my path continued on the other side. Set into the floor of my duct was a large ventilation grate. Below it, there was light. And voices. My blood ran cold. I flattened myself against the bottom of the duct, my heart hammering. I peered through the metal slats. I was looking down into a room. A huge, white, sterile room, the building's sub-basement. It wasn't a boiler room or a storage area. It was a control center. Banks of computer servers hummed along one wall. Another wall was covered in monitors showing blueprints, data streams, and dozens of camera feeds from all over the building. I saw the lobby, the hallways, the gym, and apartment 1208. My apartment. Empty. The door was closed. The lights were off. It looked completely normal. Standing in the middle of the room was the janitor. He wasn't wearing his gray coveralls anymore. He wore black tactical pants and a black shirt, a handgun holstered on his hip. He was a corporate soldier. He stood at ease, his hands clasped behind his back, looking up at a massive screen that dominated the far wall. On the screen was a man's face. He was in his 50s, with perfectly styled silver hair and a crisp, dark suit. He looked like a CEO, a politician, a man who decided fates from a leather chair in a skyscraper office. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed, annoyed, like an important meeting had been interrupted by a triviality. Status report, the suit said. His voice was calm, clear, coming from hidden speakers in the control room. Subject 02 has breached containment, the janitor said, his tone flat. He accessed the Level 12 archive. He's seen the files. The suit's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He knows his designation? He knows about Chimera? Affirmative. He also appears to be receiving assistance from the residual echo. A flicker of something, not anger, but cold, analytical fury crossed the suit's face. The Linda artifact. It has more agency than the simulations predicted. Unacceptable. My mind reeled. Residual echo. Artifact. They talked about her like she was a software bug. A stain on the carpet. A problem to be scrubbed away. The suit was silent for a moment, his gaze distant as if he were weighing options that I couldn't possibly comprehend. Then he looked directly at the janitor again, his decision made. We can't risk exposure. The Elysian Fields project is entering its final phase. No loose ends, no witnesses. My breath caught in my throat. The suit's voice dropped, becoming even colder, more precise. A death sentence delivered like a quarterly earnings report. Initiate full purge protocol for floor 12. All sectors. Scour the designated apartment. Eliminate the subject and neutralize the echo. I want that entire floor sterile by 0400. We can't have this anomaly compromising the primary test group. Eliminate the subject. Me. Neutralize the echo. Linda. The janitor just nodded once. Understood. He turned away from the screen, his movements efficient and practiced. He walked to a large, stainless steel console set into the wall. A keyboard and a series of covered switches were laid out on its surface. He typed a rapid sequence of commands. A schematic of the 12th floor appeared on a nearby monitor, the layout of my apartment highlighted in red. This was it. The flashpoint. I was watching my own execution being arranged. My muscles locked. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was a bug under a glass, watching the shadow of the boot fall. The janitor flipped open a clear plastic cover over a large, red button. He placed his thumb on it. He didn't hesitate. He just pressed it. The button lit up. On the console, a single line of text appeared in stark white letters. Purge Protocol Active, Unit 1208. I tore my eyes from the console and looked at the wall of monitors. My gaze found the one labeled CAM 1208A1. My living room. For a second, nothing happened. The room was dark, silent, just as I'd left it. Then, a circular panel in the center of the ceiling slid open with a soft, mechanical whir. A chrome nozzle descended, sleek and clinical. It began to hiss. From the nozzle, a thick, yellow gas poured into my apartment. It wasn't like smoke. It was heavy, oily, clinging to the floor and furniture. It swirled with a sickening, unnatural motion, a chemical fog that seemed to absorb the light. It was a poison, a solvent, something designed to erase. I watched, paralyzed with horror, as the yellow cloud filled my home. It crawled over the sofa, consumed the coffee table, erased the very air I had been breathing just minutes ago. This was how they cleaned up their mistakes. This was how they terminated Elise. I stared at the monitor, my mind screaming. This wasn't just about me anymore. They were erasing her, the ghost in the machine. The memory echo, the only person, living or dead, who had tried to help me. Her psychic stain, her last desperate attempt to fight back, was being dissolved by a cloud of corporate poison. In my mind, I saw her drawing. The face with the wide, terrified eyes. Now it was being wiped clean. The camera feed started to flicker, the image distorted, breaking up into static as the dense gas enveloped the lens. It was like she was fighting it, her energy interfering with their electronics one last time before being snuffed out. Then the screen went black. A single line appeared. Signal lost. The janitor watched the blank screen, his face a mask. He turned back to the control panel. He typed another command. On the main schematic, another area began to pulse. A long, thin rectangle that snaked through the entire building. The ventilation system. Purge Protocol Standby. Sector 7V. A new timer appeared on the screen, counting down from 60 seconds. He knew I was in the vents. He knew I was watching. This wasn't just a cleanup. It was an execution. And this was my final warning. They were erasing her, and I was next. 60 seconds. The numbers on the screen below were a death sentence counting down in real time. 59. 58. 57. My mind couldn't form a thought. It was just a loop of pure, white-hot panic. The yellow gas, the way it poured into my apartment, heavy and hungry. A chemical that didn't just kill, it erased. That was what they were about to pump into this entire network of vents. Into my lungs. I had to move. I had to get out. But where? Left? Right? It was all the same coffin of sheet metal. My body was a study in pain. My knees and elbows were hamburger meat. My back felt like it had been raked with claws. Every muscle screamed. 51. 50. I scrambled forward, a desperate, lurching crawl. My only tool was a short, heavy piece of iron rebar I'd wrenched from a broken support bracket earlier. It felt pathetic and useless in my hand. What was I going to do? Fight a chemical cloud with a steel rod? They erased her. They called her an artifact, a glitch. They were scrubbing her last digital footprint from the world with poison, and my death was just the collateral damage. The thought was a spark in the freezing fog of my fear, anger. Hot and sharp. 44. 43. Flick. Flick. Flick, flick. Flick, flicker. Flick. Up ahead, maybe 10 feet away. A light. Not the slow, steady pulse from before. This was a frenzy, a seizure, a frantic, noiseless scream of red light on the side of the duct. It was coming from a gray metal box, about the size of a shoebox, bolted to the wall of the shaft, a main electrical junction. The light wasn't a direction anymore. It was a target. Here. Do it here. It was Linda. What was left of her. A final, desperate message before her own signal was lost for good. 38. 37. Sounds echoed up from another connecting duct. Not from the control room below, but from somewhere closer. A metallic clang. Boots on a grate. A man's voice, sharp and clear. Sector 7 volt purge is on standby. We need visual confirmation. Fan out. Check every main shaft. They were coming. The finality of it hit me like a sledgehammer. No escape. No more running. This was the end of the line. The duct was the grave, and they were the pallbearers. But Linda's light was still flashing. A furious, defiant heartbeat in the dark. Not yet. I understood. It wasn't about escape. It was about response. 31. 30. I lunged forward, ignoring the fire in my joints. I reached the junction box. The red light was strobing right next to a heavy-duty latch. I jammed the end of my iron bar into the seam and heaved. The metal groaned. My muscles shrieked. Sweat and grease made the bar slick in my hands. It slipped, the end screeching against the box and sending a shower of sparks into the dark. Another voice, closer now. Hear that? Shaft C. Move. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild animal trapped in a cage of bone. I repositioned the bar, digging the tip in deeper, and threw my entire weight against it. There was a loud, ugly crack as the lock mechanism gave way. The heavy metal door swung open. Inside was a rat's nest of wires, thick insulated cables, bundled together like snakes, black, blue, yellow, dozens of them. A low hum vibrated from the box. A feeling of immense power held barely in check. This was the building's nervous system. Its lifeblood. 22, 21, 20. I'm at the access grate to C-4, a voice echoed, unnervingly close. I could hear the scrape of his boots just around the next bend. Getting nothing on thermal. They wouldn't see me until they turned the corner. I had seconds. Which ones? Which wires? My mind was blank with terror. A flicker of a memory from some bullshit elective class. Physics for poets. A professor drawing a simple circuit on a whiteboard. You create a short. You bypass the load. All the energy goes to one place. A very, very bad place. I saw two cables, thicker than the rest, each as fat as my thumb. One was shrouded in thick black rubber, the other in red. The main power feed. It had to be 15. 14. I dropped the rebar and grabbed the two cables with my bare hands. The power thrumming through them was a tangible thing. It made my teeth ache. I pulled. I planted my feet against the side of the duct and leaned back, a primal scream tearing from my raw throat. The plastic insulation was tough, unyielding. My fingers were slipping. My vision started to swim with black spots. 10. 9. The voice was right there. Visual on the junction box. The cover's open. He sees it. He sees me. With a final, desperate surge of adrenaline, I yanked. The insulation ripped. There was a tear, a strip of raw, gleaming copper wire exposed on the black cable. Then, on the red one. A low, angry buzz filled the air, the smell of ozone sharp in my nostrils. This was it. Total commitment. A final act. I grabbed the iron bar again, my knuckles white. I held it like a priest holding a cross, the metal cold and final. I didn't know if this would work. I didn't know if it would just electrocute me and leave my cooked body for them to find. I didn't care. They were erasing her. I would erase them. I looked at the strobing red light, a final goodbye. 5. 4. I closed my eyes. "Thank you, Linda," I screamed into the metal confines of my tomb. 3. I brought my hands together. 2. I slammed the exposed copper wires against the iron rebar. 1. The world didn't explode. It was erased. There was no sound. There was only white. A pure, silent, incandescent flash that consumed everything. It wasn't a light I saw with my eyes. It was a light I felt in my bones, in my teeth, in every cell of my body. A force hit me, not like a push, but like a physical concussion of pure energy. It threw me backward, my head cracking against the far wall of the duct with a wet, hollow thud. Then, darkness and silence, a silence so profound, so complete, it was a sound in itself. The hum of the servers from the control room below, gone. The whine of ventilation fans, gone. The emergency lights in the shaft, gone. The voices of the men hunting me, gone. It was a dead, suffocating black. The kind of black you feel, not just see. My ears roared with the phantom echo of the blast. A high-pitched keen that was the only thing left in the universe. My retinas were burned with the after-image of the flash, a ghost of white light swimming in a sea of nothing. I tried to breathe. My lungs felt scorched. The air tasted of burnt plastic and vaporized metal. I shifted, and a jolt of agony shot up my spine from the back of my head. I was alive. Below me, in the sub-basement, I knew what had happened. I had seen the wall of monitors, the control console. I had seen their whole high-tech operation. Now, every one of those screens was black. Every system was dead. The purge protocol was aborted. The countdown was gone. The janitor was standing in a dark, powerless room, blind. The trap had become a cage for them, too. I had done it. I had fought back. I had severed the building's brainstem. But the silence that followed was not the silence of victory. It was the silence of a tomb. I was alone, crippled, in the absolute dark, buried deep in the guts of a dead machine. The hunters were still somewhere in the maze with me, and now none of us could see a thing. The game had changed. The lights were out, and the board was reset. The darkness was absolute. The silence was a hammer. My ears screamed with a high, thin whine, the ghost of a sound that had erased all others. Pain was a hot wire running from the base of my skull down my spine. I was on my side, cheek pressed against cold, ridged metal. The air was a toxic cocktail of burnt plastic and ozone, a taste that scalded my lungs with every shallow breath. I was alive. The thought offered no comfort. I moved a hand. It scraped against the duct wall. I was still inside, still in the grave, but the hunters were silenced. The countdown was gone. I had won. It felt like dying. My head throbbed, a wet, heavy pulse that made my vision swim in the black. I had to get out. My body screamed in protest, a chorus of torn muscles and bruised bones, but the instinct was stronger. I pushed myself up, my knees and elbows grinding against the floor of the vent. I crawled, feeling my way through the dark. My fingers brushed against a grate. A pattern of holes. Air. Or at least, a way out of this metal coffin. I kicked at it. My boot connected with a dull clang that echoed in the dead space. The grate held firm. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through the fog of pain. I was too weak. Trapped. I braced my back against the opposite wall of the duct, ignoring the fire that licked up my spine, and drove my heel into the center of the grate again. Clang. Another kick. A screw popped. The metal bent. I drew my leg back and slammed my foot into it with everything I had left. A scream tore from my throat, raw and wordless. The grate popped free with a shriek of tortured metal and tumbled into the void below. I didn't wait. I swung my legs through the opening, my body scraping against the sharp edges of the frame. For a second I hung there, a dead weight in the dark. Then my grip gave out. I fell. The drop was only 10 feet, but it felt like a mile. I hit the floor hard, my already injured body taking the impact with a sickening jolt that stole my breath. I landed on a pile of something. The grate, a chair, I didn't know. The pain was a white-hot nova behind my eyes. I lay there, gasping, my face pressed against the cold, smooth tile floor. Then sound returned to the world. A piercing, cyclical shriek, whoop, 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 and light. Not the clean, white light of an office. This was a frantic, angry red. An emergency strobe pulsed from the ceiling, painting the room in strokes of blood and shadow. One flash, then dark. Another flash, then dark. A mad, disjointed slideshow of hell. In the first flash, I saw the room, the control center, walls of dead monitors, the master console, dark and silent, a shattered chair. In the second flash, I saw him, sprawled on the floor near the console, his expensive suit rumpled, a thin line of blood trickling from his temple. Hayes, the man in charge, the janitor. His chest rose and fell in a shallow, uneven rhythm. Not dead, just unplugged. In the third flash, I saw them. The hunters. 2 of them. One was hammering his fist against a heavy steel door, his shouts lost in the deafening wail of the alarm. The door had a keypad, now dark, locked. The other was fumbling with a handheld radio, screaming into it, getting only static in reply. They weren't hunters anymore. They were caged animals. Their eyes were wide, darting, their faces masks of pure panic. They were trapped in the dark with me. The board was reset. But this time, I knew the rules. An impulse, born of rage and adrenaline, seized me. Not to run. Not to hide. To finish it. I pushed myself to my feet, my body a wreck held together by sheer will. Every joint was on fire. I stumbled, my legs threatening to buckle. The strobing light was disorienting, chopping my vision into broken frames. The 2 men hadn't seen me yet. One was still beating on the door. The other had thrown his radio to the floor in frustration and was now pacing like a cornered wolf. I lurched toward the master console. It was dead, a massive slab of black glass and steel. But my eyes caught it. A small, secondary panel, no bigger than a tablet, glowing with a faint, steady light. Backup power. Core systems. Life support. Security. My fingers, smeared with grease and blood, trembled as I touched the screen. It flickered to life. Simple icons. A fan for ventilation. A lightning bolt for power distribution. A key. I stabbed my finger on the key icon. The screen changed. A schematic of the entire tower appeared, a wireframe skeleton dotted with red lock symbols. Every office, every stairwell, every exit, all red, all locked down. Below the schematic, 2 large, simple buttons. Lock all. Unlock all. It was the building's heart. I had my hand on the switch. "Hey, you!" The voice cut through the alarm. Sharp, close. I turned my head. The pacing goon had seen me. His panic was gone, replaced by a snarl of pure animal rage. He started toward me, a big man, moving fast. He was maybe 20 feet away. 10. My mind was empty. There was no time to think. Only act. I slammed my palm down on the unlock all button. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a sound. The door right next to me, the one the other man had been pounding on, let out a loud, definitive click. The man froze, his hand still raised to beat on the metal. His head snapped toward the sound. Then another click echoed from the hallway outside. And another. The sound rippled. It became a wave, a cascade of percussive pops, spreading from our location outward and upward. Hundreds of locks, all retracting at once. The sound of a fortress turning to sand. The entire tower, every cage, every trap, was now open. The goon charging me was only a few feet away. His fist swung toward my head. I threw myself sideways, the punch whistling past my ear. My body screamed as I twisted, but I stayed on my feet. My eyes darted around the room, lit in flashes of red. My gaze landed on a metal cylinder bolted to the wall. Red, with a black hose. I lunged for it. I tore the fire extinguisher from its bracket. It was heavier than I expected. The charging man was turning, recovering. Coming at me again. I didn't aim. I pulled the pin and squeezed the handle. A thick white cloud of chemical powder erupted from the nozzle, a sudden choking blizzard in the red-lit room. It hit him full in the face. He roared, stumbling back, clawing at his eyes, blinded and gasping. The powder filled the air, a dry, stinging fog that burned my own throat. I didn't give him a chance to recover. I reversed my grip on the extinguisher, holding it by the nozzle like a club. I stepped forward into the white cloud, swinging the heavy steel base with all the force my broken body could muster. It connected with his skull with a wet, heavy crack that was sickeningly loud, even over the alarm. He didn't make a sound. He just collapsed, a dead weight hitting the tile floor. The other man stared, his face a canvas of disbelief and terror, framed by the now open doorway. He looked from his fallen partner to me standing there in the swirling white dust, and then bolted into the hallway. He chose escape. I let him go. My legs were shaking uncontrollably now. The extinguisher fell from my numb fingers, clattering to the floor. I staggered past the unconscious form of Hayes, a man who had tried to erase people like they were typos. I didn't spare him a glance. I followed the path of the coward, out the open door, and into a concrete service corridor. The red lights and the piercing alarm followed me. I ran, up a flight of concrete stairs, past another open security door, then another. The air was getting cooler, cleaner. I could feel a draft. Up another flight of stairs, my lungs burning, my legs about to give out. I burst through a final door and stumbled out into the night. The cool, damp air of the city hit me like a physical blow. It was real air. It smelled of rain and exhaust fumes and life. The wail of the fire alarm from the building was now joined by the distant sound of approaching sirens. I collapsed onto the wet pavement of a deserted plaza, my body finally refusing to obey. People were spilling out of the main entrance 50 yards away, residents in pajamas, in bathrobes, their faces confused and frightened, looking up at the silent, dark tower they called home. They were alive because Linda gave me a target. They were free because I hit a button. They looked at each other, searching for answers no one had. I had done it. I was out. I was free. I pushed myself up, my back against the cold stone of a planter. I looked up at the building. It wasn't a triumph. It was a monolith. A jet-black tombstone scraping against the bruised purple sky, its emergency lights a weak, failing pulse. There was no victory in that sight. There was no relief. I just saw her, Linda. A ghost in the machine. A line of code they tried to delete. And I saw the others. The countless faces on that wall, the artifacts they had scrubbed. I had opened the cage, but all the ghosts were still inside. I was out, but I would never be free of that building. It was a scar on the city's skyline, and its shadow was now a scar on my soul. A cold, empty place where victory was supposed to be. The world afterward wasn't a ticker-tape parade. It was a lawyer's office that smelled like old paper and weak coffee. For weeks, that was my universe. A beige room, a long mahogany table, and a man named Marcus who had kind eyes and a billable hour that could choke a horse. I told the story again and again, to Marcus, to his junior associate, to a stenographer who never looked up. Each time, the words felt thinner, like a photograph left out in the sun. The rage was still there, a hot coal in my gut, but the edges were wearing smooth with repetition. Elysian Fields, the company that owned the tower, moved fast. Their first press release was a masterpiece of corporate bullshit. An unfortunate electrical malfunction. A tragic incident involving a few disgruntled contractors. They painted Hayes and his thugs as lone wolves, a cancer they were now bravely cutting out. They offered condolences. They promised a full internal investigation. It was a neat, tidy box, gift-wrapped for the 6 o'clock news. They were trying to erase the truth like they'd tried to erase Linda, like they had erased the others. "They can't do this," I said, my voice flat in the quiet office. I was staring out the window at the gray city. I hadn't slept in a real bed for a week after getting out. First a hospital, then a hotel Marcus had booked. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the strobing red light. I heard the whoop, whoop, whoop of the alarm. "They're going to try," Marcus said, shuffling a stack of papers. "They have deeper pockets than God. They'll bury us in motions, depositions, delays. Their strategy is simple. Exhaust you, bleed you dry, make the world forget." I turned from the window. I won't forget. The first deposition was in their building. Not the tower, but their corporate headquarters. A glass shrine to money and power downtown. The room was colder than the lawyer's office, the table longer. On the other side sat 3 of them. Suits sharper than razors, faces scrubbed clean of all emotion. The leader, a man named Sterling, had perfectly white hair and eyes like chips of ice. My testimony went on for hours. Marcus sat beside me, a silent, comforting weight. I laid it all out. The system, the hunters, the artifacts, Linda, the wall of faces. I watched Sterling's face the whole time. Nothing. Not a flicker. He just made small, neat notes on a yellow legal pad. When I was done, a silence settled over the room. Sterling slid a thin file across the table. "Mr. Cole," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone, "this is a fascinating story. Truly, a veritable work of fiction." Marcus started to speak, but Sterling held up a hand. "I'm not finished. We've, of course, been doing our own due diligence. We pulled the building's maintenance logs from before your episode." He tapped the file. "Did you know that your apartment, 44B, was flagged multiple times for extensive Stachybotrys chartarum contamination? Black mold, to the layman." My blood ran cold. "What?" "Highly toxic," Sterling continued, his voice never changing pitch. "Known to cause," and I quote from a medical journal here, "severe psychological symptoms, including memory loss, confusion, and vivid hallucinations." He looked directly at me. The ice in his eyes seemed to crack a little. A predator's smile. "Tell me, Mr. Cole, the men you fought, the things you saw, are you absolutely certain they were real?" "That's ridiculous," I snarled. My hands were balled into fists under the table. "Is it?" he asked. "We also have a sworn affidavit from a former partner of yours, mentioning a history of instability, paranoia, a predisposition to fantastical thinking," she called it. He was lying. He had to be. But the words were a physical blow. They were trying to paint me as insane, to take my trauma and twist it into a symptom. The room felt like it was shrinking. The air was thin. What if? No. I shook my head, trying to clear it. I knew what I saw. I knew what they did. But a tiny, poisonous splinter of doubt had been driven into my mind. I looked at Marcus. Even his kind eyes held a new flicker of professional assessment. The seed was planted. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled days. The media, once interested, started to back away. The narrative was shifting. I wasn't a hero anymore. I was an alleged victim, an unstable individual. Elysian Fields was a fortress, and I was throwing rocks at it. The frustration was a physical thing, a constant pressure behind my eyes. I felt the walls closing in. The world was forgetting, just like Marcus said they would. One rainy Tuesday, a package arrived at Marcus's office. A small, brown-padded envelope with no return address. Just his name and suite number, printed from a cheap label maker. Probably more discovery from Sterling's goons, Marcus sighed, slitting it open with a letter opener. It wasn't papers. He tipped the envelope, and a small, black external hard drive slid out onto his desk. It was unmarked. Clean. We looked at each other. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. "Don't plug that in here," I said, my voice sharp. Instinct. The tower had taught me to be suspicious of all technology. Marcus nodded, his face grim. He had a standalone laptop in the back room, one never connected to the internet. A clean machine, he called it. We went in, the feeling in the room heavy with a mix of dread and hope. He plugged it in. The computer whirred. A single folder appeared on the screen. Elysian_internal. My heart hammered against my ribs. He clicked it. It was full. Hundreds of files. Emails, memos, audio logs, project proposals. All of it password protected, but the person who sent it had included a simple text file named Key. The password was a single word. Artifact. The first email he opened was from Hayes to a senior VP. The subject line was Project Chimera, Phase 2 Viability. The environmental control system is performing beyond expectations. In controlled test subjects, see Artifacts 7 through 12, we have successfully induced mood alterations via subtle shifts in lighting frequency and low Hertz auditory pulses. Subject 9, Linda R., showed a 40% increase in anxiety levels and paranoid ideation after 72 hours of exposure. The system is invisible. It is untraceable. This isn't just about security. This is about behavioral modification on a residential scale. Imagine a building that can make its tenants feel more content, more productive, or more fearful, more compliant. This isn't real estate. This is a weapon. I had to sit down. My legs wouldn't hold me. It was all there. Worse than I imagined. They weren't just killing people who found out. The entire building, from its foundation to its spire, was a laboratory. A sick experiment to develop a system for psychological control. This was their endgame. The ultimate landlord's tool. We spent the next 48 hours digging through the drive. We found schematics, budgets, lists of names, not just the artifacts, but the executives who signed off, who knew, who invested. It was a roadmap of their evil. Someone on the inside had risked everything to get this to us. 2 days later, I stood on a small podium in a rented hotel conference room, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. Marcus stood behind me. This time, I wasn't there to answer questions. I was there to give answers. The air crackled with the sound of 100 camera shutters clicking at once. The lights were blinding. For a second, I was back in the control room, the red strobe painting the world in blood. My hands trembled, clutching the papers I held. "My name is Alex Cole," I started, my voice amplified by the microphone, sounding distant and foreign to my own ears. "For the past month, the lawyers for Elysian Fields have tried to tell you that I am crazy, that I hallucinated what happened inside the Skyview Tower." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. They are half right. It was crazy. But it wasn't my craziness. It was theirs. I held up a printed copy of Hayes' email. "This is an internal memo from the man they called a, quote, rogue contractor. He called his project, quote, 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 quote. Its purpose was to create a system that could manipulate the moods and health of residents without their knowledge. He called it a weapon. And his superiors called it a success." A wave of murmurs and frantic typing swept through the room. They called the people they experimented on artifacts. Unfortunate data points. But they were people. They had names. My voice cracked, but I forced it steady. I owed them this. Linda O'Rourke. She was a graphic designer. They tracked her for 6 weeks. They noted her growing anxiety. They logged her complaints about headaches. They watched her die. I didn't stop. I read every name I could remember from the files on that wall, from the names on that hard drive. Kevin Tran, Mark Ibanez, Sarah Jenkins. Each name was a hammer blow. The room had gone still. The only sound was my voice and the relentless click flash of the cameras. I was no longer a victim telling a story. I was a witness. I was a vessel for the ghosts they tried to bury. I was turning their private horror into a public reckoning. I looked out past the lights at the hungry faces of the press, and I gave them the monster they were looking for. Not me, but the men in the expensive suits. The ones who saw human lives as a rounding error on a balance sheet. It worked. The dam broke. The anonymous hard drive, verified by a dozen tech experts, was undeniable. The press conference was an explosion. Within hours, the CEO of Elysian Fields, the man with the ice chip eyes, was shown on live television doing a perp walk, his perfect suit rumpled, his face a mask of disbelief. Hayes and the surviving goons were already in custody, their silence bought for nothing. The Skyview Tower was sealed off, wrapped in yellow tape like a tombstone. I won. Marcus called it a landmark victory. The settlement was enough that I would never have to work again. But as I sat in my new, quiet apartment across town, watching the news reports on a brand-new television, there was no feeling of triumph. The victory was a cold, empty thing. Later that night, long after the city had gone quiet, I was reading a book. The silence was deep. Real, not the dead silence of events. I felt a tension in my shoulders begin to ease for the first time in months. Then the lamp on my end table flickered. Once. Twice. I froze, the book sliding from my lap. My heart kicked into a gallop. It was a new lamp. New wiring. I'd had the entire apartment's electrical system completely redone before I moved in. I had checked it myself. I stared at the lamp, my breath held tight in my chest. It stayed on, a steady, warm glow. It was nothing. A power surge. A faulty bulb. But I knew it wasn't. I was out. I was free. I had won. But they had left a piece of the machine inside my head. A scar on my soul. And some nights, in the quiet, it still flickers. 1 year. 12 months. 365 days of trying to scrub the tower out of my bones. The money from the settlement bought me this place. Small house, big yard, an hour outside the city. No neighbors close enough to hear you scream. I bought it for the silence. Real silence. The kind made of wind and rustling leaves, not the dead air pumped through a vent system. I had rules. No smart anything. No Alexa, no Google Home, no lights I could control with my phone. The television was a dumb one, a big, stupid screen that only did what the remote told it to. My locks used old-fashioned metal keys. I was building an analog fortress against a digital ghost. I spent most days out here, in the dirt. My hands were calloused. My fingernails were permanently lined with black soil. I was planting vegetables, carrots, tomatoes, lettuce, things that grew in the earth, things that were real. This was my therapy. The sun on my back, the ache in my muscles, the simple, honest work of making something live. For a while it worked. The nights were still long, but the days were quiet. I was starting to feel the tension in my shoulders finally unknot. I took a break, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of a muddy glove. I pulled my phone from my back pocket. I hated the thing, but it was a necessary evil. I scrolled through the news, politics, a stock market dip, a celebrity scandal, the usual noise. Then I saw it. An article in the business section. Arcadia Tower, the future of urban living, announces pre-sales launch. I felt a familiar, cold prickle on my neck. I tapped the link. The screen filled with a sleek architectural rendering. A spiral of glass and steel that clawed at the sky, not unlike Skyview. The article was corporate fluff, praising the visionary new developer, a shell corporation I'd never heard of, backed by some faceless global investment firm. No mention of Elysian Fields. Of course not. They had buried that name. I scrolled through the images. Rooftop gardens. A state-of-the-art gym. A communal workspace. It was Skyview all over again, just with a new coat of paint. I was about to close it, to dismiss it as just another monument to greed, when I saw the small print at the bottom of the article. Architectural Design by Krieger Vance. My blood went cold. I dropped my phone in the dirt. Krieger Vance, I knew that name. I had seen it 100 times. Watermarked on the Chimera project schematics from the hard drive. They were the ones who designed Skyview. They were the ones who designed the wiring, the vents, the whole goddamn laboratory. My breath hitched. I stood up, my knees cracking. The quiet yard no longer felt peaceful. It felt exposed. I looked at the trees at the edge of my property. The shadows seemed darker. It's nothing, I muttered to myself, the words tasting like ash. They're just architects. They take jobs. But it wasn't just a job. The name was a contamination. A single spore from a sickness I thought I had cut out. I went inside, locking the door behind me. A deadbolt and a chain. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hand shaking slightly. I took out my laptop. Another dumb machine, wiped clean every week. No saved passwords. Nothing. I typed Arcadia Tower into the search bar. The world exploded. It wasn't just that one news article. It was an entire ecosystem, a coordinated media blitz. My screen was flooded with glossy pop-up ads and auto-playing videos. A handsome, smiling man walked through a sun-drenched apartment. a happy couple, laughed on a balcony. And then the slogans. Arcadia, the home that listens. My stomach churned. An environment that adapts to you. I felt a wave of nausea. I clicked on one of the ads. It took me to Arcadia's official website. It was a masterpiece of marketing. All soft colors, gentle music, and testimonials from actors pretending to be future residents. I navigated to the features page. Our proprietary Wellness Hub system monitors ambient sound, light, and air quality to create the perfect living space, one bullet point read. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was the same language, the same lies, environmental control system. Arcadia's smart lighting subtly adjusts its color temperature throughout the day to match your circadian rhythm, improving sleep and boosting productivity. Subtle shifts in lighting frequency. The Serenity Soundscape feature neutralizes urban noise pollution and can generate calming audio frequencies, proven to reduce anxiety. Low hertz auditory pulses. I slammed the laptop shut. They didn't stop it. They didn't dismantle it. They fucking rebranded it. They took the weapon, polished it, gave it a friendly name, and were now selling it as a luxury. Project Chimera wasn't dead. It was Phase 3. This was their endgame. Not just one building, 100 buildings, 1,000. A product they could sell to the world. A world full of people who would line up and pay for their own cages. I paced my small living room. The walls felt like they were shrinking. The silence of the house was no longer a comfort. It was a vacuum. The rage I felt was so pure, so hot, it almost choked me. I had won nothing. I had been a speed bump, a temporary inconvenience in their business plan. They had thrown money at me, made a public sacrifice of a few executives, and then continued right on in the shadows. All my testimony, all the names I read, Linda's name, it was all just the cost of doing business. A rounding error. The monster was still alive, and it was bigger than ever. The scene cut. Hard, like a flip of a switch. The apartment was immaculate. White walls, blonde wood floors, a wall of glass looking out over a city that glittered like a circuit board. The air smelled of new paint and money. A young couple stood in the middle of the living room, a sales agent with a plastic smile gesturing around them. The woman, maybe 30, ran her hand along a cool marble countertop. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the large space. Her husband was fiddling with a control panel on the wall. "Honey, look at this." He tapped the screen. A soft instrumental track began to play from invisible speakers in the ceiling. The agent says it can analyze your mood through your voice to play the right music. Isn't that wild? The woman came over, resting her head on his shoulder. "That's amazing. A little creepy, but amazing." "The phone's probably listening to us again anyway," he laughed, wrapping an arm around her. "Tech is crazy now. You just get used to it." "And this is the wellness report," the agent chimed in, pointing to a graph on the screen. "It shows you your sleep quality, ambient air purity. It even tracks cortisol indicators from voice patterns to help you manage stress. The whole building works to keep you happy and healthy. It's not just an apartment. It's a partner in your well-being." "I love it," the wife said. "I really love it, Mark." They moved into the bedroom. It was even more luxurious. A king-size bed with 100 pillows. A walk-in closet bigger than my first apartment. They stood in front of a massive floor-to-ceiling mirror that took up an entire wall. They looked at their reflection, seeing their future. A happy life in a perfect home. They didn't see the detail. No one would. It was a flaw so small, so insignificant, it was functionally invisible. There, in the upper right-hand corner of the vast, silvered glass mirror, was a tiny black dot. Perfectly round. Smaller than a pinhead. It wasn't a chip in the glass. It was flush with the surface. A camera lens, reduced to its absolute minimum size, embedded within the mirror itself. It watched them silently, taking in their faces, their smiles, their private, hopeful moment. The LED didn't light up. They had learned from their mistakes.